The argument started like they always do, over something stupid. It was a Saturday morning, and I just needed to go to the hardware store. I'm in the middle of building some shelves for my office, and I needed different screws. The keys to our only car, a nice SUV, were on the tray by the door where my wife, Amelia, likes them kept. I grabbed them, yelled that I'd be back in an hour, and was about to leave. "And where do you think you're going?" Her voice came from the top of the stairs, sharp and bossy. She was standing up there with her arms crossed, looking down at me. Not like a wife, but like a principal about to give a kid detention. "To the hardware store," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I need screws for the shelves." She walked down the stairs slowly, just staring at the keys in my hand. "Did you ask me if you could take the car?" I just looked at her for a second. The question was so ridiculous. I'm a 42-year-old man. I'm a partner at an architectural firm. I don't need to ask permission to go buy screws. "It's our car, Amelia," I said. I could already feel myself getting annoyed. "It's my car," she said back with this little smirk. "The registration is in my name. The insurance is in my name. Your name isn't on a single piece of paper for that vehicle. It's a privilege for you to use it, not a right." And yeah, technically, she was right. When we bought the car 3 years ago, her dad, who is a financial planner and manages our money, said it was smarter for tax purposes to put it in her name. Like an idiot, I went along with it to avoid a fight. I paid the down payment for my savings, and the monthly payments come from our joint account, which my salary mostly funds. But on paper, it was hers. And now she was using that paper like a weapon. "I need to go to the store," I said again, my voice getting harder. She just held out her hand. "The keys, Michael." I didn't move. We just stood there staring at each other. This wasn't about the car, and we both knew it. It was about control. It had always been about control. Her controlling the money, our social life, even what temperature the house was set at. This was just her being more obvious about it than usual. Finally, her voice got louder, and she snapped, "No car keys until you learn to ask for permission. I am not having this argument every single weekend." I looked at her hand, then at the keys, then at her face. Her expression was just cold. And that was it. Something in my head just settled. A decision that had been building for years finally clicked into place. This marriage wasn't just bad. It was a cage, and she had just rattled the bars one last time. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I put the keys right in her hand. "Sure," I said. My voice was calm, almost flat. "You're right. I should have asked." The look of pure victory on her face was something to see. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd put me in my place. She turned with a smug smile and walked back upstairs, leaving me standing there like a teenager who'd just been grounded. She had no idea she hadn't just won a stupid argument. She had just started an avalanche. Update 1. That weekend was weird. I played the part of the good, obedient husband. I finished the shelves with the wrong screws. I spent the rest of the time reading in my office. Anytime Amelia wanted to go out, I'd politely ask if I could come with her. To the grocery store, to her parents for brunch. She was loving it, acting all high and mighty now that she'd won, granting me the privilege of riding shotgun in the car I paid for. But while I was acting defeated, my mind was working overtime. Look, I'm an architect. My whole job is about finding weak spots in a structure before it collapses. And our marriage was a condemned building. I was about to start planning the demolition. On Monday morning, she drove me to work. This was a new thing she started, and it felt just as humiliating as you'd think. "I'll pick you up at 5:30, she said, like my mom dropping me off at school. The second I walked into my office, I started making moves. First thing on the list, get independent. At lunch, I walked over to a car dealership near my office. I didn't want another SUV. I wanted something for myself. I test drove a sports sedan I'd wanted for years. One Amelia always said was impractical. I leased it right there on the spot, using money from my personal savings. The dealership said they could deliver it to my office garage by the end of the day. Second on the list, cut off the money supply. After the dealership, I went to a completely different bank. I opened a new checking account, a new savings account, and an investment account, all just in my name. Back at the office, I got on my company's HR portal and had my entire paycheck rerouted to my new accounts. That was the end of my money going into the joint accounts Amelia and her dad controlled. Third, and most important, figure out the damage. For years, I'd let Amelia's dad, Richard, manage our finances. He's a partner at a small wealth management firm and had convinced me he could get us better returns. I had even given him power of attorney over my investment portfolio, which I had for 10 years before I even met Amelia. It was a stupid mistake based on trust, and I was about to find out just how stupid. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone with my lawyer, Ben. He's a shark who specializes in messy, high-asset divorces. I told him everything. Ben was blunt. He said I had to revoke Richard's power of attorney immediately and get an independent audit of everything he'd ever managed. He warned me it was going to get ugly. That evening, I was waiting on the curb when Amelia pulled up. She had that smug look on her face. "Ready to go home?" she asked. "Actually," I said, "I think I'll drive myself." Right on cue, a flatbed truck from the dealership pulled into the driveway. On the back was my new car, a black sedan looking mean and ready to go. The driver hopped out and handed me the keys. Amelia just stared, her mouth hanging open as they unloaded my car. The look on her face was something else. It wasn't just shock or anger. I saw fear in her eyes for the first time in a long time. It was the fear of a queen who just watched a pawn get to the other side of the board. "What is that?" she finally managed to say. "That," I said, holding up my new keys, "is my car, so I don't have to ask for permission anymore." I got in, and the smell of new leather was incredible. I looked over at her, still sitting in her SUV, looking completely stunned. I gave her a little wave and drove off, leaving her in my rearview mirror. The first bomb had gone off. Update 2. The drive home was amazing. I just listened to the engine. It was a hell of a lot better than the tense silence I'd gotten used to at home. When I pulled into the driveway, she was already there, having broken who knows how many laws to beat me home. She was standing on the porch, arms crossed, looking furious. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low. "Okay," I said, and walked right past her into the house. She came in after me, slamming the door. "You bought a car? A $60,000 car? Without even discussing it with me?" "Leased it, actually," I said. "And you're right, I didn't. I made a decision. I need a reliable way to get to work, and my access to the other car became conditional." "Conditional? I just wanted you to ask. It's common courtesy, Michael." "No, Amelia," I said, finally turning to face her. "It's control, and I'm done playing. The new car is just the first of many changes around here." The anger on her face just vanished, and she went pale. She started to look scared. "What does that mean?" "It means I had a very interesting talk with my lawyer today," I said, "and my new bank manager. I'm taking back control of my finances. My paycheck isn't going into the joint account anymore, and I've revoked your father's power of attorney over my investments." Mentioning her father was a direct hit. She actually flinched. "You can't do that. My father is our financial advisor. He has a strategy for us." "He has a strategy for himself," I said back. "One that seems to involve a lot of risky investments with my money and not a lot of transparency. I've requested a full audit of every account he manages. I'm very interested to see what turns up." She just stood there, totally silent. She'd lost control of the car, and now she was losing control of the money. Her whole power structure was falling apart in just a few hours. The next few days were a cold war inside our house. She wouldn't speak to me, just slammed doors and had loud, angry phone calls with her mother. I didn't care. I was busy. I had a team of accountants going through years of Richard's financial records, and what they were finding wasn't good. He had been churning my accounts, making tons of trades just to generate commissions for his firm. He had invested a huge chunk of my money in a tech startup that went bust, a company he was a secret partner in. He wasn't just mismanaging my money, he was stealing it. The real bombshell landed a week later. The auditors found wire transfers from my investment account to a holding company I'd never heard of. Turns out that company owned the house her parents lived in. He had used over $200,000 of my money to pay off his own mortgage. With the audit report, I was ready. I told Amelia to have her parents at our house on Saturday morning for an urgent financial discussion. I told her to have them bring their lawyer. I told her my lawyer, Ben, would be there too. They arrived acting all offended and defiant. Richard walked in like he owned the place, already complaining and demanding answers. "This is a breach of trust, Michael." After all I've done for you." I didn't say a thing. I just let Ben take over. Ben was a shark. He calmly laid out everything from the audit, with charts and copies of the illegal wire transfers. He explained, in simple terms, the legal definitions of investment fraud and embezzlement. As Ben talked, Richard's face went from red to a pasty white. The tough guy act disappeared and he just started sweating. Amelia's mom looked like she was going to be sick. Amelia just stared at the table in horror. When Ben was done, he slid a document across the table, a separation agreement. "Here's the deal," Ben said. "Michael is willing to not press criminal charges against you, Richard. He's also willing to not sue your firm into the ground, which you would lose. In exchange, you will repay every penny you stole, with interest. And Amelia," he said, turning to her, "will sign this agreement. She waives all rights to alimony and any claim on Michael's assets. Her name comes off the deed to this house. She leaves with her personal belongings and nothing else." Their lawyer, who was clearly out of his league, started to argue about marital assets. Ben just smiled. "Are you sure you want to do that? My next call is to the DA. Your client is looking at 10 years in federal prison. His daughter could be an accessory. Your choice." Final update. The negotiation was over before it started. Faced with prison, they folded. Richard, it turned out, had just enough money stashed away to pay me back. He had to sell off some properties and liquidate his own portfolio, but the full amount was wired to my account within a week. Amelia signed the papers. She had no other option. The day she moved out was quiet. She packed her stuff without a word, her face just a mask of bitter anger. She didn't cry or yell. I think she was just exhausted. The game of control she and her father had been playing for years had finally trapped them. The last I heard, her parents had to sell their big house and move into a small condo. With my money gone and Richard's reputation shot, their fancy lifestyle was over. His firm is being investigated, and he'll probably lose his license. Amelia is living with them. She had to get a real job as a sales associate in a department store. She's living a life she never wanted, without the financial safety net she always took for granted. A few months ago, I was driving home late from the office in my new car. I pulled up to a red light and glanced over. It was her old SUV. She was in the driver's seat. Our eyes met for a second. She didn't look angry. She just looked empty. The light turned green, but she didn't move. I just drove away, leaving her sitting there in the car she fought so hard to control, a car that now represented everything she had lost. My fiancé said, "Your best man is too ugly for my wedding photos. Replace him." I said, "You're right, I'll handle it." Then I replaced her instead. When she showed up for the rehearsal dinner and saw who was sitting in her seat, original post I, 32 male, thought I was marrying the love of my life. Victoria, 29, and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. Wedding planned for next month. Everything seemed perfect until last Thursday. My best friend Tommy, 33, has been my ride or die since middle school. Dude had a rough go. House fire when he was 16 left him with burn scars on the left side of his face and neck. Never stopped him from being the most genuine, loyal person I know. Started his own auto shop, married an amazing woman, has 2 great kids. When I asked him to be my best man, he actually teared up. Last Thursday, Victoria and I were finalizing wedding details. She pulled up the photographer's shot list, then dropped this bomb. "So about Tommy. What about him? He can't be in the main wedding party photos. The scarring will ruin the aesthetic." I literally thought she was joking. "That's not funny, Vic. I'm serious. Maybe he can stand at the end where we can crop him out? Or we could use makeup to cover." "Are you actually suggesting I hide my best friend because of how he looks?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's my wedding. I've been planning this since I was 12. Every photo needs to be perfect. He's just too ugly for the vision I have." The word ugly hit like a punch. This woman had eaten Sunday dinners at Tommy's house. His kids called her Aunt Vicky. "He's my best man, period." "Then find a different one. Maybe your cousin Brandon? He's tall, good jawline. You want me to replace my best friend with someone I see twice a year because he's prettier? It's called having standards, babe. The photos last forever. Do you really want to look back in 20 years and see that in every shot?" I stood up, weirdly calm. "You're right. I should handle this." She smiled, kissed my cheek. I knew you'd understand. We can tell Tommy he's needed for something else important, like managing the guest book. I nodded. I'll take care of it tomorrow. Update 1. I didn't sleep that night. Kept replaying every interaction between Victoria and Tommy. How she'd always been too busy to attend his kids' birthday parties. How she'd suggested we upgrade our friend group once we were married. Red flags I'd wrapped in rose-colored glasses. Friday morning, I drove to Tommy's shop. He was under a Corolla, music blasting. Tommy, we need to talk. He rolled out, saw my face. Shit, who died? My relationship. Told him everything, word for word. His face went through about 10 emotions. Hurt, anger, then weirdly, concern for me. Bro, I'll step down. I don't want to cause. Stop, just a stop. You're my best man. You're my brother. If anyone's getting replaced, it's not you. What are you saying? I'm saying I need a new bride. He stared at me. You're dumping Victoria 3 weeks before the wedding? No, I'm recognizing that Victoria already dumped everything that matters to me. She just hasn't figured it out yet. Tommy tried to talk me out of it. Said wedding stress makes people crazy. Maybe she didn't mean it. But I knew better. This wasn't stress. This was who she really was when the mask slipped. I had a plan though. See, the rehearsal dinner was in 5 days. Deposits all paid, vendors locked in, Victoria's whole family flying in from around the country. And since I'd been handling the finances, she was more about the vision. Everything was in my name. First call. My sister Rebecca, 30F. She's an event planner, knows everyone in the industry. Bex, hypothetically, how hard would it be to change some details for the rehearsal dinner? What kind of details? Like, the bride? Long pause. What did she do? Told her about Tommy. Rebecca went ballistic. She'd always been protective of Tommy since his accident. She was there that night, actually drove him to the hospital. That shallow witch! Okay, what do you need? I need the most beautiful, classy woman you know to be my date to the rehearsal. Someone who makes Victoria look like she shops at discount stores. I know just the person. Remember Natasha from my company party? Natasha. Former model turned PR executive. Looked like Zendaya's prettier sister. Also happened to be Tommy's cousin, though Victoria never knew that because she never bothered learning about Tommy's family. Perfect. Call her. Next, I called the venue. Explained there'd been a change in the primary guest. They were surprisingly cool about it. Turns out they dealt with Victoria's demanding attitude and were happy to accommodate any changes I wanted. Then came the fun part. I called Victoria's mom, Eleanor. Hi, Eleanor. Just confirming you're still flying in Tuesday for the rehearsal? Of course. I'm so excited. Victoria showed me the photos of her dress. Stunning. Great. Just wanted to make sure. See you at 7 p.m. sharp at the venue. Will Tommy be there? Victoria mentioned something about adjusting the wedding party. Oh, Tommy will definitely be there, front and center. Update 2. The next few days were surreal. Victoria was in full wedding mode, constantly showing me Pinterest boards and flower arrangements. I smiled, nodded, agreed with everything. You were right about the photos, I said Sunday night. They should be perfect. She beamed. I knew you'd come around. Did you talk to Tommy? I handled it. And Brandon agreed to step in. Everything sorted. Monday, I met with my lawyer, canceled all the wedding vendors in my name, lost some deposits, but most were understanding given the circumstances. The photographer even refunded me in full after I explained why we were canceling. Turns out his brother has facial scarring from an IED in Afghanistan. He was disgusted. The venue for the actual wedding? Canceled. The honeymoon flights and resort? Canceled and partially refunded. The only thing I kept was the rehearsal dinner. That was going to be my farewell gift to Victoria, a very public lesson in consequences. Tuesday afternoon, Victoria left to get her nails done with her bridesmaids. I packed everything I owned and moved it to my brother's place. Left her stuff exactly where it was, but took everything that was mine. Even the good coffee maker, that was definitely mine. Tommy came by to help. You sure about this? Never been more sure of anything. This is going to be brutal. Yeah, for her. At 6:30 p.m. I put on my best suit, the one Victoria always said made me look like leading man material. Tommy picked me up, dressed sharp as always. We swung by to get Natasha, who looked absolutely stunning in a deep blue dress. You sure you're okay with this? I asked her. Are you kidding? Victoria once told me I was pretty for someone who used to model. This is karma delivered first class. We arrived at the venue at 6:45. The staff greeted me warmly, and I noticed they'd followed my updated instructions perfectly. The place cards had been adjusted, the seating chart reorganized. Victoria's name was nowhere to be found, but there was a Natasha Williams card at the bride's seat. Guests started arriving. My family all knew what was happening. I'd called them Monday night. They were there for support, and honestly, probably for the show. Victoria's family was clueless, mingling and taking photos. At 7:10, I saw Victoria's car pull up through the window. She was laughing with her sister, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. She walked in wearing the white cocktail dress she'd bought specifically for tonight. Bridal, but not too bridal, she'd said. She saw me first, started walking over with a huge smile. Then she saw Tommy, standing right next to me at what would be the head table. Her smile wavered slightly. Then she saw Natasha, seated in her spot, wearing the corsage meant for the bride. The color drained from her face. What is she doing here? Oh, Natasha? She's my date. We're celebrating my freedom tonight. You're what? Where's my seat? You don't have one. This is a family and friends event. You're neither. Her mom approached, confused. Victoria, why are you standing there? Come sit. Wait, who's that in your chair? Mom, something's wrong. I stood up, tapped my glass. The room went quiet. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to what was supposed to be our rehearsal dinner. There's been a change of plans. There will be no wedding. I've recently discovered that Victoria and I have fundamentally different values. She believes that physical appearance determines someone's worth. Specifically, she demanded I replace my best man, Tommy, here, because his burn scars would ruin her perfect wedding photos. Gasps around the room. Tommy's wife, Lauren, actually stood up like she was ready to throw hands. So, I continued, I've decided to replace someone from the wedding party after all. Just not Tommy. Victoria, you're dismissed from my life. Your things will be available for pickup tomorrow between 9 a.m. and noon. Bring a truck. Update 3. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. Victoria's face went from white to red to purple in about 3 seconds. You can't do this. Already did. Weddings canceled. Venue, vendors, honeymoon, all gone. We have contracts, deposits. All in my name, all canceled yesterday. Her sister Olivia jumped up. This is insane. You're humiliating her over a tiny misunderstanding. Calling my best friend too ugly for photos isn't a misunderstanding. It's showing me exactly who she is. Eleanor was in tears. Victoria, what is he talking about? You didn't actually say that about Tommy. Victoria spun around. Mom, it's not like that. I just wanted nice photos. Every bride deserves perfect photos. By excluding someone because of scars they got saving his little sister from a fire, Lauren finally spoke up. Oh yeah, Victoria didn't know that part of the story either. Never cared enough to ask. The room went silent. Even Victoria's dad, who'd been trying to stay neutral, looked disgusted. You told me Tommy was in a car accident, Eleanor said slowly. Same difference, Victoria snapped. The point is you're shallow, I interrupted, and cruel, and I'm grateful you showed me before we got married. Victoria turned back to me, tears starting, but not sad tears, angry tears. You think you can just embarrass me like this? I'll sue you. You'll have to pay for everything. Sue me for what? Breaking up with you? Good luck with that. This is defamation. I'll ruin you. Natasha finally spoke up, voice smooth as silk. Actually, defamation requires false statements. Everyone here heard exactly what you said about Tommy. That's just truth. Victoria noticed her properly for the first time. Who even are you? Some escort he hired? I'm Tommy's cousin. You know, the ugly best man? Guess shallow runs in your family's opinion of ours. That's when Victoria lost it completely. Started screaming about how I was a pathetic loser, how she'd settled for me, how she could do so much better. Her parents tried to calm her down, but she was in full meltdown mode. You think you're better than me? You're nobody. I made you better. I fixed your stupid style, made you presentable. Without me, you're just some mediocre guy with an ugly best friend. And there it is, I said calmly. The real Victoria. Thank you for proving my point. Security showed up then. Yeah, I'd warned the venue this might happen. As they escorted Victoria and her family out, she kept screaming threats. Her mom looked mortified. Her dad wouldn't even make eye contact with her. The rest of us had a great dinner. My family, Tommy's family, are real friends. Natasha was the perfect date. Charming, funny, and she kept making jokes about how she was available for any future revenge dinners I might need. Update 4. The next 3 days were absolutely unhinged. Victoria showed up Wednesday at 8 a.m. with a U-Haul and her entire family. I wasn't there, stayed at my brother's specifically to avoid this. But my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, 70 years old, takes no shit, filmed everything on her phone. Victoria tried to take everything. The TV, mine. The couch, mine. The kitchen appliances, mostly mine. When she couldn't get into the apartment, I'd already cleared it with the landlord to change the locks. She started screaming that I was stealing from her. Mrs. Rodriguez called the cops. When they arrived, Victoria claimed she lived there and I'd illegally evicted her. Except her name wasn't on the lease. She had no mail there. Her ID showed a different address. The cops told her she could only take what she could prove was hers, which was her clothes, her makeup, some decorative pillows, and the Peloton her dad bought her, all of which I'd already boxed up and left with the building manager. But the real circus started Thursday. Victoria went on social media with her version of events. According to her post, I'd been emotionally abusive for months. I was jealous of her success. She's a part-time influencer with 3K followers. I'd trapped her into a relationship, then humiliated her. I was obviously gay and using Tommy as a cover. Yeah, she went there. She was starting a GoFundMe for emotional trauma therapy. The post got maybe 30 likes, mostly from her echo chamber friends. Then Tommy's wife Lauren commented with screenshots. Screenshots of Victoria's texts from months ago. Tommy gives me the creeps. Does he have to come to everything? Can't we just do couples things without the burn victim? I'm not shallow, but he makes every photo look like a medical documentary. Victoria deleted the post within an hour. But the internet is forever, and Lauren had already shared it to the local wedding shaming group. It went mini viral. The wedding photographer who'd refunded me even commented, I've photographed hundreds of weddings. The ugliest thing I've ever seen is a bride who thinks scars determine someone's worth. Friday morning, I got a call from Victoria's dad, Richard. Nathan, I'm sorry. We didn't raise her to be like this. I appreciate that, Richard. I need you to know we're not paying for any lawyer if she tries to sue you. This is on her. Thank you. Also, Tommy saved his sister? Yeah, when he was 16, ran back into a burning house. His sister was 8. Long pause. Jesus Christ. And she called him, I'm so sorry. The grand finale came Saturday. Victoria showed up at my brother's house with her new boyfriend, some guy named Chase she'd apparently been talking to for months. Interesting timeline there. She wanted to show me she'd upgraded. Chase looked like a budget Chris Hemsworth if Chris Hemsworth skipped leg day and had the personality of white bread. He tried to act tough, chest puffed out. So you're the loser who fumbled Victoria? I'm the guy who dodged a bullet. Yeah. She told me what you did. Pretty pathetic, bro. What's pathetic is being the rebound guy for someone who just got publicly dumped for being shallow. Whatever, she's with a real man now. Tommy chose that moment to pull up, all 6'3" of him, built like a linebacker from years of manual labor. Chase took one look at him and suddenly remembered he had somewhere to be. Victoria was left standing there, her upgrade speeding away in his leased BMW. This isn't over. She screamed. You ruined my life. No, Victoria. You ruined your own life when you decided my best friend's appearance was more important than his character. Or mine, or yours. Final update. It's been 3 months now. The dust has settled, and here's where everyone ended up. Victoria tried to sue me for breach of promise and emotional distress. Her lawyer dropped the case when he realized there was no legal grounds and she couldn't pay his retainer. She then tried to claim I'd stolen her grandmother's ring. I never gave her a family ring. Bought one from a regular jewelry store, which I returned for 80% value. That went nowhere too. She's still with Chase, I think? Though Lauren showed me his Tinder profile is active, so that's going well. Her Instagram is now private, after the wedding shaming groups had their fun. Last I heard, she was trying to become a life coach about surviving narcissistic abuse. The irony is thick enough to cut. Her family essentially distanced themselves. Eleanor sent me a Christmas card with an apology letter inside and a check for $500, her way of tributing to what I lost on deposits. I sent it back with a note saying her apology was enough. Richard still texts me occasionally about football. They didn't invite Victoria to Thanksgiving, from what I heard. She spent it with Chase's family, who apparently asked her why she wasn't married yet since she was getting up there in age. She's 29. Tommy was my rock through all this. Honestly, if Victoria had succeeded in making me drop him, I'd have lost more than a best friend. I'd have lost my integrity. His daughter actually made me a card that said, "Thank you for choosing Daddy over the mean lady." I have it framed on my desk. Oh, and Natasha? We actually went on a few real dates. Didn't work romantically. Turns out we're better as friends. But she's dating one of my cousins now, and they're stupidly happy. She still jokes that she provides revenge +1 services for anyone who needs them. Me? I'm good. Better than good, actually. I learned that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Victoria showed me she valued appearances over substance, image over loyalty, and her perfect day over real relationships. The thing that still gets me isn't even what she said about Tommy. It's that she assumed I'd go along with it. That she thought so little of my character that I'd dump my best friend for better wedding photos. That's not love. That's not even respect. That's just viewing someone as an accessory to your life, not a partner in it. I kept one photo from our relationship, the one from Tommy's daughter's birthday party last year. Victoria had said she was sick that day. In the photo, it's just me, Tommy, his family, and my family, all laughing at something his son said. Everyone who actually matters to me is in that picture. And looking at it now, I realize Victoria was never supposed to be in it anyway. She'd edited herself out of the important moments long before I made it official. Some of Victoria's flying monkeys still occasionally try to start shit, sliding into my DMs about how I ruined a good woman or how I'm probably gay anyway. I just block and move on. The people who matter know the truth. The people who don't matter. Tommy asked me last week if I regret doing it so publicly. If maybe I should have just called off the wedding privately, let her save face. I thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. Nah, she tried to make me feel guilty for defending you. She wanted to hide you like some shameful secret. The only shameful thing was her, and I just made sure everyone could see it. Love you too, bro. Don't make it weird. But yeah, I love that scarred, loyal, beautiful bastard. And any woman who can't see his worth doesn't deserve to be in either of our lives. The wedding would have cost about $30K all told. Losing a few grand in deposits was worth every penny to find out who Victoria really was. Consider it the best investment I ever made. I paid a small price to avoid a lifetime of shallow misery with someone who thought love came with aesthetic requirements. Word of advice: when someone tells you to remove a good person from your life because they don't fit the image, remove the person making the demand instead. Your real friends will still be there. The fake ones? Well, they'll show themselves out when they realize you value character over cameras. Oh, and Victoria's perfect wedding vision? Her sister Olivia got married last month. Guess who she didn't invite? Apparently, even family has limits when you publicly demonstrate that you're garbage wrapped in a pretty bow. Karma's not always instant, but damn if it isn't thorough.
My name is Alyssa, and at 32, I never expected to be betrayed by my own brother. The old warehouse my grandfather left me wasn't just brick and concrete, it was potential others couldn't see. When I woke up to Jake's text, my stomach dropped. Sold your worthless building for $510 kelvins. Family needs the money more than you. What he didn't know would change everything. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you've ever had family betray your trust, hit subscribe. This journey isn't for the faint-hearted. Growing up, my grandfather Theodore was my rock. While other kids spent weekends at the mall, I followed him around his properties, absorbing everything about real estate like a sponge. He was a self-made businessman who started with nothing and built a modest empire of commercial properties through sheer determination and smart investments. His calloused hands and weathered face told the story of decades of hard work, and I treasured every minute I spent learning from him. My parents never understood my fascination with buildings and property values. Mom was a high school English teacher who preferred books to blueprints, and Dad worked in banking, but never had the entrepreneurial spirit that Grandpa Theodore and I shared. They weren't unkind, just perpetually confused by my interest in what they considered a boring industry. Then there was Jake, my brother, 3 years older, and the undisputed golden child of the family. He had the kind of natural charisma that made people gravitate toward him, with his perfect smile and ability to charm anyone within minutes of meeting them. While I was quiet and analytical, Jake was loud and impulsive. Where I saved, Jake spent. Where I planned, Jake winged it. Yet somehow his failures were always celebrated more than my successes. Jake just needs a little help getting back on his feet. Dad would say writing yet another check to cover my brother's latest business venture gone wrong or credit card debt. By the time Jake hit 30, he had burned through 3 different careers, defaulted on 2 car loans, and moved back home twice. Still, my parents saw his potential rather than his pattern. I took a different path. After earning my business degree with a focus on urban development, I started at the bottom of a commercial real estate firm, working 60-hour weeks and living in a tiny apartment to save money, Grandpa Theodore noticed. While my parents fussed over Jake's latest scheme, my grandfather would invite me to coffee to discuss zoning laws and property appreciation. "You've got the eye, Alyssa," he'd tell me, tapping his temple with one finger. "You see what a place could be, not just what it is now. That's rare." When Theodore passed away 3 years ago, his absence left a gaping hole in my life. The family gathered for the reading of his will with varying expectations. Jake naturally assumed he would receive the lion's share as the eldest grandchild and only grandson. My parents subtly reinforced this assumption, speaking in hushed tones about family legacy and masculine industries that made my blood boil. The lawyer's office was silent as the will was read. Theodore had divided his assets with careful consideration. My parents received his house and investment accounts. Various small properties and savings were distributed among cousins and other relatives. When it came to his prized commercial properties, everyone leaned forward in anticipation. Jake received 2 established strip malls in affluent neighborhoods, already fully leased with steady income streams. He barely contained his smug smile as the properties were described. Then came my inheritance, one abandoned warehouse in the oldest, most neglected part of downtown, an area that hadn't seen development in decades. The disappointment in the room was palpable. My mother patted my hand sympathetically, while my father cleared his throat and muttered something about Theodore having his reasons. Jake didn't bother to hide his amusement. "Well, at least you got something," he chuckled later at the post-funeral gathering. "Though I'm not sure what you'll do with a crumbling tetanus factory. Maybe open a haunted house." What Jake and the rest of my family didn't understand was that Theodore hadn't given me a burden, he'd given me an opportunity. The final time we'd spoken, just days before his unexpected heart attack, we'd discussed that very warehouse district and the whispers of potential rezoning. He'd squeezed my hand with a knowing look, and now I understood why. Jake got income, I explained to my friend Sophia over coffee the next day. But Grandpa gave me potential. That's so much more valuable if you know what to do with it. While my family wrote off my inheritance as Theodore's sentimental mistake, I began quietly researching. The warehouse might have looked worthless to everyone else, but to me it was a blank canvas in a location that I suspected would soon become very valuable indeed. When Jake called to joke about trading his strip mall for my decrepit dump, I politely declined, which only confirmed his belief that I was holding on to it for emotional, rather than practical reasons. Little did he know that my grandfather's final gift would become the center of a family drama none of us could have anticipated, and that the worthless building would reveal the true nature of those closest to me. The first time I visited the warehouse after it officially became mine, I understood why everyone thought Theodore had played a cruel joke on me. The brick exterior was crumbling in places, windows were boarded up, and the inside was a cavernous space filled with decades of dust and abandoned equipment. But standing in that vast open area, sunlight streaming through holes in the roof, I didn't see decay. I saw possibility. I began my research immediately, spending evenings after my day job poring over city planning documents and development proposals. What I discovered confirmed my grandfather's foresight. The city had quietly been acquiring properties in the surrounding blocks. There were draft proposals for a comprehensive urban renewal project that would transform the entire district into a mixed-use development zone with tax incentives for tech companies and startups. The warehouse district sat between downtown and the river, a location that had been neglected during previous development booms, but was now perfectly positioned for the city's expansion plans. With the growing tech industry and housing shortage, it was only a matter of time before developers would start looking in this direction. I scheduled meetings with city planners, pretending to be concerned about how future developments might affect my property value. Each conversation revealed more pieces of the puzzle: infrastructure improvements planned for the next fiscal year, preliminary environmental impact studies already completed, and interest from several major tech firms in creating a satellite campus in our city. "This area is definitely on our radar," admitted one planning official after swearing me to discretion. "But we're trying to acquire properties quietly before speculators drive up prices." Armed with this information, I began creating a comprehensive business plan. I hired an architect friend at a discount rate to draft preliminary designs for converting the warehouse into a modern workspace while preserving its industrial character. The high ceilings, exposed brick, and massive windows that were currently boarded up would become selling points, not liabilities. The next step was far more challenging: securing funding. Bank after bank rejected my loan applications, unconvinced by my vision for a neighborhood that still contained abandoned buildings and had higher crime rates than other parts of the city. "The location is simply too speculative," one loan officer told me bluntly. "Come back when the city actually announces something official." Undeterred, I took on consulting work in addition to my full-time job, saving every penny. I spent weekends at the warehouse clearing out decades of debris myself to save on costs. My few friends thought I had lost my mind, sacrificing my social life for a derelict building. My family was even less supportive. "Alyssa's playing dollhouse with Grandpa's junk warehouse," Jake told our parents during a family dinner I barely had time to attend. Meanwhile, I've increased the occupancy rate at both my properties and raised rents by 15%. My parents beamed at Jake's business acumen while I silently pushed food around my plate, too tired from hauling trash all day to defend myself. What was the point? They wouldn't understand until I could show them results. The bureaucratic challenges were just as exhausting as the physical work. I navigated a labyrinth of permit applications, zoning variances, historical preservation reviews. The building was just old enough to require additional paperwork and endless inspections. Each step forward seemed to reveal 3 new obstacles. 6 months into my ownership, the first piece of luck fell into place. The city formally announced the first phase of the urban renewal plan, focusing on infrastructure improvements in the warehouse district. Property values didn't immediately skyrocket as I'd hoped, but investors started paying attention. A small angel investor group specializing in urban redevelopment agreed to provide partial funding for basic renovations after seeing my detailed business plan and learning about my background in real estate. It wasn't enough to complete the project, but it allowed me to fix the roof, update the electrical systems, and make the building secure. As work progressed, neighboring property owners started approaching me, curious about my plans. Some offered to buy me out, assuming I was renovating just to flip the property. I politely declined every offer, no matter how tempting the immediate profit seemed. The real breakthrough came 14 months after I inherited the warehouse. A major tech company announced they were looking for space for a new innovation hub, and my newly renovated building was perfectly positioned. When their scouts contacted me to arrange a viewing, I knew my grandfather's faith in me was about to be validated. I kept this development secret from my family. After months of dismissive comments and jokes at my expense, I wanted to wait until something concrete materialized before sharing my progress. The family reunion planned for the following month would be the perfect opportunity to reveal my success when the deal was finalized. What I didn't realize was that my silence had been misinterpreted. While I was quietly building toward success, my family had constructed an entirely different narrative about my inheritance and my intentions for it. This misunderstanding would soon explode into a betrayal I never saw coming. The text message that changed everything arrived at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work, mentally preparing for a final meeting with the tech company representatives later that day when my phone buzzed. Sold your worthless building for $510 kelvins. Family needs the money more than you. Papers are signed. Check being deposited today. You're welcome. I stared at the message from Jake, my mind refusing to process the words. This had to be some kind of sick joke. I immediately called his number, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again. Nothing. With shaking hands, I texted back, "What are you talking about? You can't sell property you don't own. This isn't funny, Jake." No response. Panic rising in my throat, I called my lawyer Robert, who had handled the transfer of the property after my grandfather's death. "Robert, someone's claiming they sold my warehouse. Is that even possible? Could it be some kind of scam?" "Not without your signature," he assured me. "Unless, let me check something. Can you come to my office right away?" I called in sick to work and drove straight to Robert's office, my mind racing through possibilities. Had there been a mistake in the will, some legal loophole I didn't know about? Robert's face was grave when I arrived. "I've made some calls. There was indeed a sale filing yesterday for your property. The documentation appears to include your signature on all the required forms. But I didn't sign anything." "I know," he said quietly. "That's what concerns me. I've requested copies of the paperwork, but based on the description, we may be looking at forgery." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and legal discussions. By noon, we had confirmed the worst. Jake had somehow forged my signature on sales documents, listing himself as having power of attorney. The buyer was a limited liability company called Downtown Development Partners, which Robert discovered was a shell company with connections to a major development corporation. As we were untangling this legal mess, another shocking revelation emerged. My parents had witnessed the signatures effectively validating the forgery. This wasn't just Jake acting alone. My entire family had conspired against me. I sat in Robert's office, numb with disbelief. Why would they do this? How could they do this? "I think you need to ask them directly," Robert advised. "Meanwhile, I'll file for an emergency injunction to freeze the sale and the funds." I drove to my parents' house in a state of emotional shock. The familiar ranch-style home where I'd grown up now seemed alien and threatening. My mother answered the door, her expression shifting from welcome to wariness when she saw my face. "Alyssa, we weren't expecting you today. You helped Jake steal from me." The words came out flat and cold. My father appeared behind her. "That's a very dramatic way to put it. Come inside, we shouldn't discuss family matters on the porch." Once inside, their justifications poured out. Jake was facing bankruptcy again. He had taken out high-interest loans to invest in a friend's business that had collapsed. The bank was threatening to foreclose on his house where he lived with his wife and 2 young children. He would have lost everything. My mother explained, as if this made perfect sense. The family had to step in. "By stealing my property," I asked incredulously. "You weren't doing anything with it except pouring money into renovations that would never pay off," my father countered. "Jake found a buyer willing to pay good money for that eyesore. $510,000. That's a windfall for a building you got for free." "Where is Jake now?" My parents exchanged glances. "He's taken the kids to the lake house for a few days. He needed a break from all the stress." Of course he did. Jake creates a disaster, steals from his sister, then goes on vacation, while others deal with the fallout. Some things never change. "The sale was for the good of the family," my mother added, reaching for my hand. "Jake needed the money more than you need that old building." I pulled away from her touch. "That wasn't your decision to make. Where I come from, we call this fraud. It's a felony." My father's face hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. We're family. Families help each other." "By committing crimes, did Jake tell you he forged my signature, that he lied about having power of attorney? Did you know you were witnessing fraudulent documents? Their silence was answer enough. The building wasn't Jake's to sell. It wasn't your decision to make. And now you've all committed fraud. Surely you wouldn't press charges against your own brother, my mother gasped, finally realizing the seriousness of the situation. I looked at these people who had raised me, who had always favored Jake, who had dismissed my hard work and ambition, who had now crossed a line I never imagined possible. In their minds, Jake's needs would always outweigh my rights. I need to go, I said, not answering her question, because I honestly didn't know what I would do yet. The betrayal was too fresh, too deep. That night was the longest of my life. I barely slept my mind, cycling through memories of family gatherings, Jake's constant financial emergencies, my parents' endless support for him, and casual dismissal of my achievements. Had they always thought so little of me? Had they always seen my property, my inheritance from the grandfather who believed in me as a resource they could appropriate for Jake when needed? The next morning, exhausted but resolute, I called Robert. I want to press charges, I told him. All of them. Forgery, fraud, whatever else applies. Are you sure? He asked gently. This will permanently affect your relationship with your family. I thought about the text message that had started it all. How casually Jake had announced stealing something that I had poured my heart and soul into for over a year. How entitled he had felt to take what was mine. What relationship? I replied. They've shown me exactly how they see me. Now I need to show them who I really am. The revelation that would turn this family drama into a national news story began with an unexpected phone call the day after I confronted my parents. I was sitting in Robert's office reviewing the legal filing to freeze the fraudulent sale when his secretary transferred a call. Is this Alyssa Wilson? This is Marcus Jenkins from the City Planning and Development Office. I'm calling about the warehouse property on Foundry Street. I exchanged glances with Robert, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, that's my property, I confirmed, emphasizing the word my. Well, that's precisely why I'm calling. Our office has received documentation indicating a sale of this property to Downtown Development Partners LLC. Given the property's significance to our urban renewal initiative, I wanted to confirm whether you've actually authorized this sale. My heart began racing. No, I absolutely did not authorize any sale. In fact, my attorney is filing papers right now to stop this fraudulent transaction. There was a pause on the line. I see. That's concerning, Miss Wilson. Would it be possible for you to come to our office today? There are some matters regarding your property that you should be aware of. 2 hours later, I sat in a conference room at City Hall, surrounded by development plans and property valuations that confirmed everything I had suspected and worked toward. Marcus Jenkins wasn't just a random city employee. He was the deputy director of the Urban Renewal Commission, and he had been hoping to approach me about a public-private partnership opportunity. Your warehouse is a keystone property for the innovation corridor we've been planning, he explained, pointing to a large map where my building was highlighted in red. Based on the latest appraisals and comparable sales in cities with similar development patterns, properties in your building's location and condition are now valued between $3 and $3.5 million. I nearly choked. $3 million. At minimum. And that's just the current valuation. Once the Tech Hub announcement goes public next month, we project values to increase by another 20 to 30%. Robert, ever the professional, kept his composure better than I did. And you said there was a partnership opportunity. Jenkins nodded enthusiastically. The city has secured federal grants for adaptive reuse of historic industrial buildings. Your warehouse qualifies. We could offer matching funds for renovation in exchange for dedicating a portion of the space to public use. Innovation incubators for local entrepreneurs, tech education facilities, that sort of thing. As Jenkins laid out the details of potential partnerships, tax incentives, and development grants, the full magnitude of what Jake had done became crystal clear. He hadn't just stolen my property, he had stolen my future, my vision, my hard work, and he'd done it for pennies on the dollar. The $510,000 that had seemed like a windfall to my parents was less than 1/6 of the property's actual value. Jake had not only committed fraud, he'd committed monumentally stupid fraud. After our meeting, Robert made a series of calls that accelerated our legal proceedings. By that afternoon, a judge had issued an emergency injunction freezing both the property transfer and the funds. The local business journal caught wind of the story, a fraudulent sale of a key property in the city's most anticipated development zone, and suddenly my family drama was page 1 news. Downtown warehouse at center of family fraud scandal, valued at $3.2 million, read the headline the next morning. The article detailed the city's development plans, the property's strategic importance, and the basics of the alleged fraud. While the reporter had been careful not to name names pending criminal charges, anyone who knew our family would recognize the situation. My phone exploded with calls and texts from Jake around noon. I let them all go to voicemail, listening instead to his increasingly panicked messages. "Alyssa, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Call me back immediately. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Did you really have to get lawyers involved? I was just trying to help the family." The final message revealed the truth. How was I supposed to know the building was worth that much? Nobody told me about any development plans. You should have said something. So there it was. Jake hadn't known. In his mind, he was stealing a worthless property from me, which somehow made it acceptable. Only after discovering he had monumentally undervalued it did he see a problem with his actions. My parents called next, their tone dramatically different from our previous conversation. "Alyssa dear, we need to discuss this situation as a family," my mother began, her voice syrupy with forced affection. "We may have acted hastily," my father added. "We didn't have all the facts." Translation: now that they knew the property was worth millions, they regretted giving it away for Jake's relatively small debts. The would-be buyer was also causing problems. Downtown Development Partners LLC, realizing they had nearly scored the deal of the century through fraudulent means, were attempting to distance themselves from the transaction while simultaneously trying to hold the sale agreement valid. Their lawyers contacted Robert with various threats and offers alternating between claims they were innocent purchasers and suggestions of settling the misunderstanding. Meanwhile, 3 other development companies contacted me directly after reading the news story, each offering to purchase the warehouse legitimately for sums that made Jake's $510,000 look like pocket change. One offer reached $3.8 million. The most surreal moment came when Jake's wife Shannon called me in tears. "Alyssa, you have to drop the charges," she pleaded. "Jake could go to prison. He's a good father. He made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday," I replied calmly. "What Jake did was calculated fraud." "But he's your brother." "Yes, and that made the betrayal worse, not better." As the legal proceedings advanced, I received an unexpected call from the tech company I had been negotiating with before this chaos began. Despite the legal complications, or perhaps because of the publicity surrounding the property, they were still interested in leasing the renovated warehouse for their innovation hub. "We've been impressed with your vision for the building and your perseverance," their representative told me. "Once the legal issues are resolved, we'd like to resume our discussions." With this potential tenant still on board and the city eager to include my property in their development plans, I realized that despite my family's betrayal, my grandfather's faith in me had been well placed. The warehouse wasn't just valuable real estate, it was proof that I had inherited Theodore's vision and business sense. Jake had tried to steal a building. What he didn't understand was that the true value wasn't in the bricks and mortar, it was in seeing potential where others saw only decay. That was something he could never take from me. The weeks following the revelation of my property's true value and my family's betrayal were some of the most challenging of my life. With Robert's guidance, I hired a specialized legal team that included a prosecutor turned white-collar crime attorney named Diana Chen and a real estate fraud expert named Michael Okafor. Their confidence gave me strength as we navigated the complex intersection of criminal and civil proceedings. What your brother did constitutes multiple felonies, Diana explained during our first strategy session. Forgery, fraud, filing false documents, identity theft, each charge carries significant penalties. I don't necessarily want Jake in prison, I admitted, surprised to find I meant it despite my anger. I just want justice and for everyone to understand you can't steal from family and call it love. Michael nodded. Our primary goal is to completely invalidate the fraudulent sale and secure the return of any funds already transferred. The criminal charges give us leverage, but they're separate from the civil case to restore your property rights. The legal process moved forward with excruciating slowness and surprising suddenness in turns. Some days nothing seemed to happen. Other days brought multiple court filings, emergency hearings, and strategic decisions that needed immediate attention. I continued working my day job, though my boss had been understanding about my frequent absences for legal matters after the story hit the local news. Jake's response to the criminal charges swung between desperate attempts to reconcile and vicious counterattacks. One day I'd receive tearful voicemails begging for forgiveness. The next, his lawyer would file motions alleging I had verbally promised him the property or claiming he had misunderstood our grandfather's intentions. My parents launched a two-pronged campaign of emotional manipulation and social pressure. They called relatives, family, friends, even my former classmates spinning a story of family hardship and my vindictive refusal to help my struggling brother. Some believed them, others saw through the manipulation and reached out to offer support. I always knew Jake was the golden child, but this is beyond belief, my cousin Rachel said when she called. Count me as a character witness if you need one. The stress took a toll on my health and emotional well-being. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and found myself jumping every time my phone rang. When Diana noticed my exhaustion during a deposition preparation session, she made an unusual suggestion. You need support beyond legal counsel, Alyssa. I'm going to recommend a therapist who specializes in family betrayal and high-conflict situations. This case will take months, and you need to take care of yourself to see it through. Initially resistant, I eventually agreed to see Dr. Sampson, a no-nonsense therapist who helped me process my conflicting emotions about the case. I felt justified in pursuing legal action, but also grieved the family relationships that would never recover. I was angry about the betrayal, yet sometimes found myself wondering if I was overreacting a response. Dr. Sampson identified as the result of years of family dynamics that prioritized Jake's needs over mine. Your family is hoping you'll fall back into old patterns, she explained. They're counting on your desire for harmony to override your need for justice. But setting boundaries isn't vindictive, it's healthy. As the criminal case against Jake progressed, my parents finally grasped the seriousness of the situation. The district attorney had added charges of conspiracy against them for knowingly witnessing fraudulent documents. Facing potential legal consequences themselves, they hired separate attorneys and stopped their public campaign against me, though the private emotional appeals continued. Your father could lose his banking license, my mother sobbed during one of her increasingly rare calls. Our reputation in the community is ruined. Is that what you wanted? I wanted my family to respect my property rights and not commit felonies. I responded a statement Dr. Sampson later praised as a healthy boundary. The legal battles consumed so much of my energy that I had little left for social connections, but surprisingly new supportive relationships emerged from the chaos. Diana introduced me to a women's business network where I met other female entrepreneurs who had faced their own challenges. One of them, Layla, owned a successful architectural salvage business and immediately understood the value I saw in the warehouse. You've got to show me this place when all this legal nonsense is over, she insisted. I bet there are amazing architectural details hiding under years of neglect. Through Layla, I connected with Derek, a commercial real estate developer with experience in historic renovations who offered practical advice on navigating city permits and preservation requirements. Unlike my family, these new connections saw my vision for the warehouse as exciting rather than delusional. 4 months into the legal proceedings, we received our first major victory. The judge in the civil case ruled that the sale was invalid due to the fraudulent documentation officially returning ownership of the property to me. The funds Jake had received were ordered to be returned with interest and penalties. Jake's attorney immediately filed an appeal, but Robert assured me it was unlikely to succeed given the evidence. Still, the criminal case continued, with Jake facing multiple felony charges that could result in prison time. It was during this period that Jake finally reached out with something resembling genuine remorse rather than self-pity. He requested a meeting through our attorneys, and against Diana's advice, I agreed to see him in a neutral location with our lawyers present. Jake looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated posture I'd never seen in my charismatic brother before. "I never thought it would go this far," he said after an uncomfortable silence. "I just saw a solution to my problems and took it." "By stealing from me," I stated flatly. "I didn't think you valued that old building. You never told any of us what you were planning. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you and Mom and Dad dismissed it. But even if the warehouse had been worthless, it was still mine, not yours to sell." Jake nodded slowly. "I get that now. I really do. I'm trying to make this right, Alyssa, but I need your help. The plea deal they're offering still includes jail time." There it was, the real reason for the meeting. Jake wasn't seeking reconciliation. He wanted me to intervene in his criminal case. "That's between you and the district attorney," I said, rising to leave. "Some things can't be fixed with an apology and family loyalty, Jake." As I walked away, I realized I had finally broken the pattern of putting Jake's needs before my own. A small victory in a situation with no true winners, but a crucial step in my personal growth nonetheless. 8 months after Jake's text message upended my life, the legal battles finally reached their resolution. Jake accepted a plea deal that included 2 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service, full restitution of the funds received from the fraudulent sale, and a felony conviction on his record. In exchange, he avoided prison time, an outcome that brought me more relief than I had expected. My parents received probation and community service for their roles as accessories, along with hefty legal bills that depleted much of their retirement savings. The would-be buyers ultimately dropped all claims to the property after evidence emerged suggesting they may have known about the fraudulent nature of the transaction, likely avoiding their own criminal charges in the process. The warehouse was unquestionably mine. Again, its value now widely recognized and continuing to rise as the city's development plans progressed. What had once been my private vision was now public knowledge, attracting attention from investors, developers, and potential tenants across the region. "You've become quite the real estate celebrity," Robert joked during our final meeting to close the civil case. "Not the way anyone would want to gain recognition, but your grandfather would be proud of how you've handled this." The media coverage had indeed raised my profile in the real estate community. The story of the worthless warehouse that turned out to be worth millions stolen by a brother who didn't recognize its value resonated with people. I received invitations to speak at business events, declined offers to option my story for a TV movie, and fielded constant inquiries about the property's future. More importantly, the tech company that had been interested before the legal chaos remained committed to the project. After months of negotiations, we signed a 10-year lease agreement for 90% of the renovated space at terms that would ensure the building's profitability for years to come. "We love the story behind this building," their CEO told me at the contract signing. "It embodies the vision and perseverance we want our company to represent." The city's partnership proved equally valuable. Their matching grant program provided $3 million for historic preservation elements of the renovation funds that allowed me to restore the building's distinctive architectural features while creating a modern, functional interior. The 20% of space dedicated to public use would house a tech training center for underserved youth, creating a pipeline of local talent for the building's commercial tenants. With the legal issues resolved and development plans underway, I faced the more personal aftermath of the ordeal. Family gatherings were now complicated affairs, with relatives taking sides and uncomfortable silences when Jake or my parents entered a room. I attended my cousin's wedding, maintaining polite distance from my immediate family while reconnecting with extended relatives who had reached out in support during the court proceedings. Jake made awkward attempts at reconciliation, sending birthday cards and occasional texts that I acknowledged but didn't encourage. His wife Shannon reached out, more genuinely apologizing for her part in pressuring me to drop charges and inviting me to their children's school events, which I sometimes attended sitting quietly in the back. The kids miss their Aunt Shannon told me during one such event. They don't understand what happened. They don't need to, I replied. This is between the adults. My parents found the new family dynamic more difficult to navigate. After decades of enabling Jake's behavior and dismissing my ambitions, they struggled to accept that the family power balance had shifted. My financial success contrasted sharply with their diminished retirement circumstances and Jake's continuing money troubles as he worked to pay restitution. We always wanted the best for both our children, my father said during a strained Thanksgiving dinner at my aunt's house. We never meant for things to turn out this way. I know, I responded, because I did understand. Their favoritism toward Jake hadn't been malicious. They simply couldn't see past his charm to recognize his pattern of poor choices. They had failed me as parents, but not out of cruelty, out of blindness. Meanwhile, my professional life flourished. Using the warehouse project as leverage, I negotiated a partnership at my firm, specializing in urban redevelopment and adaptive reuse of historic properties. The value of the warehouse continued to climb as the renovation progressed, and the surrounding neighborhood began its renaissance. 6 months after the legal proceedings concluded, I received a development proposal that brought the story full circle. A major real estate investment group offered to purchase the fully leased warehouse for $4.5 million, a figure that would represent an extraordinary return on my investment of time and resources. I scheduled a meeting with my new financial advisor, Marina, to discuss the offer. It's an excellent price, she confirmed after reviewing the terms. Well above market value. They're betting on the area's continued appreciation. Selling would give me capital for other projects, I mused, but something doesn't feel right about it. Marina studied me for a moment. This isn't just about numbers for you, is it? This building represents something more. She was right. The warehouse had become more than a property. It was tangible proof of my grandfather's faith in me, my own business acumen, and my ability to stand firm against those who had undervalued both the building and me. Selling now would bring profit, but at the cost of something less tangible but more valuable. I'm going to decline, I decided. This project isn't finished yet. As the renovation neared completion, I found myself thinking about my grandfather more often. Standing in the nearly finished space with its restored brick walls, massive windows now unboarded to flood the interior with light, and original wood beams carefully preserved, I could almost feel his presence. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered to the empty building. I did have the eye for it. The warehouse that my family had dismissed as worthless had become the cornerstone of my professional reputation and financial security. More importantly, the fight to keep it had taught me to value myself and my vision, even when those closest to me could not see what I saw. As I walked through the space that would soon buzz with innovation and activity, I realized that the true transformation wasn't just in the building itself, but in the woman who owned it. 1 year after the legal battle ended, I stood on a temporary stage in the central atrium of what was now called the Theodore Innovation Center, named in honor of my grandfather. Hundreds of people gathered for the grand opening. City officials, employees of the tech company that occupied most of the building, students from the technology training program, media representatives, and members of the business community, who had watched this project unfold with interest. When I inherited this building, most people saw only what it was, an abandoned warehouse in a forgotten part of town, I told the crowd. But my grandfather taught me to see potential where others see problems, and that vision is what we're celebrating today. The renovated space was magnificent. The original industrial character remained intact: exposed brick walls, restored wood beams, and factory windows, now complemented by modern amenities and sustainable technology. The central atrium featured a preserved section of the original machinery as an art installation honoring the building's past while embracing its future. As I cut the ribbon and the crowd applauded, I scanned the faces before me. My new circle of supporters was well represented: Robert, Diana, Layla, Derek, and other professionals who had helped make this project a reality. Conspicuously absent were my parents and Jake, though I had sent them invitations out of courtesy. Their absence was both a sadness and a relief. This moment of triumph was simpler without the complications of our damaged relationship. In the year since the court cases concluded, I had established a new normal with my family. We maintained limited contact on my terms, occasional phone calls, carefully scheduled holiday appearances, brief exchanges at family events. The closeness we once shared was gone, replaced by a civil distance that protected my boundaries while acknowledging our shared history. Jake had surprised everyone by taking his legal consequences seriously. His community service hours at a housing nonprofit had evolved into a part-time job, and he was slowly working to repay both the court-ordered restitution and his numerous other debts. Whether this represented genuine change or merely adaptation to his reduced circumstances remained to be seen, but it was more responsibility than he had shown in the past. My parents had struggled more with the aftermath. Their social standing in the community had suffered, and friends who had once admired their parenting now questioned their judgment. The financial strain of legal fees had forced them to downsize their home and adjust to a more modest retirement than they had planned. More difficult for them was the shift in family dynamics. Jake's legal troubles had finally revealed the pattern that I had seen for years, his charm concealing a willingness to take shortcuts and avoid consequences. They could no longer maintain the fiction that his financial difficulties were just bad luck or temporary setbacks. We enabled him, my father admitted during a rare, honest conversation 6 months after the case ended. We never taught him that actions have consequences. And we didn't see your potential, my mother added quietly. We were wrong about both our children. This acknowledgement, while healing, couldn't erase decades of favoritism or the trauma of their betrayal. Dr. Sampson helped me understand that forgiveness didn't require forgetting or returning to old patterns. You can release the anger without releasing the boundaries, she explained. Forgiveness is for your peace, not their comfort. This perspective allowed me to move forward without bitterness, maintaining appropriate distance while acknowledging that my family had acted from misguided love rather than malice. They had genuinely believed that Jake's needs outweighed my rights, a fundamental value difference that I could understand without accepting. My professional growth had been equally significant. The success of the warehouse project established me as an expert in adaptive reuse and urban renewal. I left my old firm to start my own development company, focused on revitalizing overlooked properties, applying the lessons I had learned from the warehouse to new projects throughout the city. As my business grew, I made a point of mentoring young women entering the male-dominated real estate industry. Once a month, I hosted workshops in the Innovation Center's community space, sharing practical knowledge about property evaluation, financing strategies, and navigating bureaucratic obstacles. The most valuable skill in this business isn't financial analysis or construction knowledge, I told these aspiring developers. It's the ability to see what could be, not just what is. That vision is what transforms neighborhoods and creates opportunity. After the grand opening ceremony, as guests explored the building and celebrated its transformation, I slipped away to the rooftop terrace we had created as part of the renovation. From this vantage point, I could see the city skyline and the surrounding neighborhood where new development was already spreading outward from the catalyst of our project. Layla joined me at the railing, taking in the view. Quite a difference from that first time you showed me the building. Remember all the pigeons and that collapsed staircase? I laughed. I remember you were the only person who didn't think I was crazy for seeing potential here. That's because I know value isn't always obvious, she replied. Most people want the easy win, the property that's already improved, or the relationship that doesn't require work. They miss the hidden gems because they're afraid of the effort. Her words resonated beyond real estate. My family had valued ease over integrity, choosing the quick solution of stealing my property rather than facing Jake's financial problems honestly. They had seen only the surface, a seemingly worthless building, rather than the potential beneath. The hardest lesson from all this, I confessed, was accepting that the people who should have believed in me the most were the ones who underestimated me the worst. But maybe that's why Grandpa left me this building instead of one of the easier properties. He knew I had the strength to fight for it if necessary. The year of healing had brought me to a place of surprising peace. The betrayal that had once consumed my thoughts had become just one chapter in a longer story of growth and success. The warehouse that my brother had dismissed as worthless had become the foundation of a thriving business and a transformed neighborhood. The family relationships I had once thought essential had been replaced by friendships and professional connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As we returned to the celebration, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond the building project. I had not only preserved my inheritance, but had transformed it into something greater than even my grandfather might have imagined. More importantly, I had transformed myself from someone whose value was determined by family expectations into a woman who defined her own worth. The journey from betrayal to triumph had taught me that true value isn't determined by others' assessments. It comes from having the vision to see potential where others see nothing, the courage to defend what's yours, and the wisdom to know when to hold firm and when to let go. Have you ever had someone underestimate what you valued most, only to prove them wrong in the end? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of standing your ground against family betrayal resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories of triumph over life's toughest challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes what others see as worthless holds the greatest value of all.
Why are you someone's reason for needing a therapist? I came home from work the day after my dad's funeral and found my fiancé lying in our bathtub with his wrist cut open. His goodbye letter was taped to our mirror, and the poem he wrote for me back in 7th grade was playing on loop. My entire body went into shock as I started physically convulsing. I wanted to drop next to him and start pulling him out, but I have an extremely weak heart, and I'm prone to heart attacks, and seeing my fiancé dead less than 24 hours after I buried my own father triggered a severe stroke. I collapsed onto the floor where my vision went white, and I don't really remember anything, besides him suddenly leaping out of the bathtub and grabbing my shoulders before screaming, "It's a prank," over and over as my world shut black. I apparently died and was resuscitated, and when I woke up in the hospital 13 hours later, my fiancé was beside me holding a bouquet of flowers. The doctors told us that my heart is now 3 times weaker than before, and I was now at extreme risk of sudden cardiac death. They put me on 13 different medications and made it crystal clear that stress, even another prank, could literally kill me. That night, my fiancé came to me on his knees. He was crying and literally groveling. "I don't deserve you, but if you give me another chance, I promise I'll be better. I'll be the man you fell in love with again." I knew the safe decision was to say no, but this was the only time he'd ever done anything so stupid in the 13 years I'd know him. I told him I'd stay, but gave him a list of rules he now had to follow. For the first few months, he kept his word. We went to couples therapy. We slowly started laughing again, putting donut cream on others' noses and licking it off. He puffed my pillows and learned to cook for us. And when my grief about my dad hit, he'd find the perfect balance between giving just enough space and attention. Somewhere along the line, I started believing that nearly dying was the best thing that happened to me. But then he started going back to his old ways. Suddenly, he was blaring music while I was trying to sleep, groaning about being too busy to get my medicine when my chest pains hit. He cut his work hours down so I'd be motivated to get back to full time, and even started drinking at bars after work because I was stressing him out. Soon he was telling his friends he never wanted to stay in the relationship anyway. I had to start locking myself in our bedroom because he'd yell about how I demanded all this from him, but couldn't even give him intimacy. That's when it happened. I came out of the bathroom after getting my period, and when I turned the corner, he suddenly jumped out to scare me. I felt my heart literally freeze, and ended up on the floor palpitating and clutching my chest. I had to crawl to our medicine cabinet because he wouldn't help me. My heart stabilized, and that night I ran away. I immediately threw myself into my healing process, where at one of my support groups I met Cameron. His own father had abused his chronically ill mother in the past, so we connected on a deep level. We moved in, and he helped me regain strength. Not just mentally, but my doctor said my heart was healthier too. 4 years to the day after I left my ex-fiancé, I got a call at 10 a.m. It was him, and he sounded panicked. Oh my God, finally, please help me. I didn't say anything, just waited for him to speak. I've had a situation with my new girlfriend. I still wasn't saying anything. That's how I found out he might be going to prison. He'd assaulted his new girlfriend's mother. She called him out for putting alcohol over her daughter, so he attacked her and repeatedly punched her sternum. Can you testify for me? He asked. I was still silent. Remember how I took care of you after you almost died? I'm a good guy who made a mistake. I still kept quiet. I'll go to prison if you don't help. It'll be your fault. That's when I finally responded. It's telling that you still think the consequences of your actions aren't your fault. What happened between us was different, he suddenly yelled. I was stressed. You couldn't work and you expected me to do everything and you... That's your problem. I cut him off. I could tell he was taken aback because I'd never stood up to him before. You almost culled me and still saw yourself as the victim. Now you beat an elderly woman, and somehow still see yourself as the victim. He went quiet. But you know what? I added. I'll testify. Wait, really? The excitement in his voice made me sick. Hey, Karina. I still love you. I told him I'll see him in court and hung up. On the day of, I walked in to see him shaking. We locked eyes, and his face just lit up and his body relaxed. He mouthed, "Thank you," before holding up a small love heart at me. My face stayed neutral. The whole trial, I sat in the back and watched the prosecutor rip him apart. He kept looking back at me like I was his only lifeline. So when it was finally my turn to get up on the stand, I looked right at him. And when asked for a description of his character, I made full eye contact. There's a lot of things I can say about Christopher. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. I pause on the witness stand, letting that sentence hang in the air while my mind pulls me back to earlier that morning. I stood in the courthouse lobby with my pill organizer clicking in my coat pocket, watching Christopher pace near the courtroom doors about 30 feet away. He kept glancing over at me like he expected me to walk over and tell him everything would be okay, but I stayed exactly where Hannah told me to wait. My heart monitor beeped softly under my shirt, tracking every anxious spike in my pulse. Christopher's hands were shaking and he kept running them through his hair, and part of me recognized that nervous habit from 13 years of knowing him. But I didn't move. I just stood there feeling the weight of my emergency medications in my purse, and remembering how I got here. My brain flashed back to that day 4 years ago when I came home from Dad's funeral and found Christopher in our bathtub. The fake blood was everywhere, smeared on the white porcelain and dripping down the sides. That poem from 7th grade was playing on repeat through the bathroom speakers, the one about forever and always. My whole body started shaking so hard I couldn't control my arms or legs. I remember reaching toward him because I thought he was dead, and then my vision went completely white. Everything just disappeared into nothing. I woke up 13 hours later in a hospital bed with tubes coming out of my arms. The doctors stood around me with these serious faces and told me my heart was now 3 times weaker than it was before. One of them, an older woman with gray hair, looked right at Christopher and explained that another shock like that could kill me instantly. They put me on 13 different medications, lined up in orange bottles on the bedside table. A younger doctor made Christopher sit in the chair next to my bed while they went through each medication and what would happen if I didn't take them. He explained that stress wasn't just bad for me anymore, it was literally deadly. That night after the doctors left, Christopher got on his knees right there beside my hospital bed. He was crying so hard he could barely get the words out. His face was all red and wet and he kept saying he'd be better, that he'd be the man I fell in love with again if I just didn't leave him. I knew saying yes was probably the stupidest thing I could do. But we'd been together for 13 years, and this was the first time he'd ever done something this bad. So I told him he could stay, but gave him a list of rules he had to follow. For the first few months after I got home from the hospital, things were actually good between us. We went to couples therapy every Tuesday evening and slowly started laughing again. We did silly things like putting donut cream on each other's noses at breakfast. He learned how to cook my safe foods, the ones that didn't make my heart race, and fluffed my pillows every single night before bed. When the grief about Dad hit me hard, Christopher somehow knew exactly when to give me space and when to hold me. But then he started slipping back into his old ways so gradually I almost didn't notice it happening. The music got louder when I was trying to sleep, bass thumping through the walls. He started sighing really heavily when I asked him to pick up my medications from the pharmacy. He cut his work hours down to part-time and said it was to motivate me to get back to full-time, even though my doctors specifically said I couldn't handle that kind of stress yet. One night I came out of the bathroom after getting my period, and Christopher jumped out from around the corner. My heart literally stopped beating right for a few seconds, and I collapsed straight down onto the floor. I was clutching my chest and gasping while he just stood there watching me. I had to crawl across the carpet to the medicine cabinet by myself because he wouldn't help me get up. That's when I knew I had to leave. I grabbed what I could carry that same night while he was passed out drunk on the couch. I locked myself in my car with 2 bags of clothes and my medications, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. I drove to a women's shelter across town. The numbness that settled over me during that drive felt safer than the fear, like my body was finally protecting itself the only way it knew how. At a support group for abuse survivors 2 weeks later, I met Cameron. His mom had been chronically ill and his dad had abused her for years, so he understood things I didn't have to explain out loud. He got how people use your illness against you and make you feel like you're the problem for being sick. We started talking after the meetings in the parking lot, and something about him felt steady in a way I'd forgotten was even possible. Over the next year, Cameron helped me build routines that actually worked for my health instead of against it. I took my medications on time every single day, went to all my doctor appointments, and slowly started processing the grief about Dad that I'd pushed way down inside. It wasn't dramatic or fast, just small improvements that added up over months and months. 18 months after I left Christopher, I sat in Dr. Yamaguchi's office while she pulled up my test results on her computer screen. She'd run a full cardiac workup that morning with an ECG, an echocardiogram, and about 6 different blood tests to check my medication levels. I watched her face while she scrolled through the numbers, trying to read whether the news was good or bad. Then she actually smiled, which was something I'd never seen her do before during an appointment. She turned the monitor toward me and pointed at a graph showing my heart function over the past year and a half. The line had gone up slightly. Not a huge jump, but definitely better than where I'd been right after leaving. She explained that my ejection fraction had improved from 32% to 38%, which meant my heart was pumping blood more effectively than it had in years. The stress reduction from leaving Christopher had probably saved my life, she said in her usual straightforward way. I started crying right there in her office. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when you realize you made the right choice even though it was the hardest thing you'd ever done. Dr. Yamaguchi handed me a tissue and told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing because it was working. 4 years to the day after I left, I was standing in my kitchen making scrambled eggs when my phone started buzzing on the counter. I glanced at the screen and saw Christopher's name, which I'd never deleted from my contacts even though I probably should have. My first instinct was to hit decline and block the number, but something made me swipe to answer instead. I didn't say anything, just held the phone to my ear and waited. His voice came through panicked and desperate, talking so fast I could barely understand him at first. He kept saying he needed my help, that he'd been trying to reach me for days, that this was an emergency. I stayed completely silent, not giving him anything to work with. Then he said he'd had a situation with his new girlfriend, and my stomach dropped because I knew whatever came next was going to be bad. He rambled for a while about how things had gotten out of hand, how he never meant for any of this to happen, how everyone was overreacting. I turned off the stove and sat down at my kitchen table, still not speaking. Finally, he admitted what had actually happened. He'd attacked his girlfriend's mother after she called him out for drinking too much around her daughter. He'd punched her in the chest repeatedly, hitting her sternum over and over until she fell down. Now he might go to prison because the old woman had pressed charges. The way he told the story made it sound like this was something happening to him, instead of something he'd done to someone else. When he asked if I would testify as a character witness for him, I didn't respond at first. He kept talking to fill the silence, reminding me how he took care of me after I almost died, calling himself a good guy who just made a mistake. He said everyone deserves a second chance, and I of all people should understand that since I'd given him one before. Then his voice changed and got harder. He said if I didn't help him, going to prison would be my fault. That's when I finally spoke up and told him it was telling that he still thought the consequences of his actions weren't his fault. He started yelling immediately, saying what happened between us was completely different, that he'd been stressed because I couldn't work, and I expected him to do everything. I cut him off and said that was exactly his problem. He almost killed me and still saw himself as the victim. Now he'd beaten an elderly woman and somehow still saw himself as the victim. He went quiet for a few seconds. Then I added that I would testify for him. His whole tone changed and he got excited, thanking me over and over. He even said he still loved me, which made me feel sick. I told him I'd see him in court and hung up. The next morning, I called the prosecutor's office and asked to speak to someone about Christopher's case. They connected me with Hannah Pendleton, a victim witness advocate assigned to help people testify. She suggested meeting at a coffee shop near the courthouse instead of at her office, which I appreciated because it felt less formal and scary. I got there early and picked a table in the back corner where I could see the door. Hannah showed up exactly on time, carrying a leather folder and wearing practical clothes, not a suit like I'd expected. She sat down across from me and got straight to the point without any small talk. She explained exactly what testifying meant, walking me through the process step by step. I'd be subpoenaed, which meant I legally had to show up. The defense attorney would try to make me look like a bitter ex-girlfriend seeking revenge. The judge might limit what I could say about my own experiences with Christopher. She asked what safety measures I needed and whether I wanted Christopher to be kept away from me at the courthouse. Her straightforward approach made me feel less scared and more prepared for what was coming. She didn't make any promises about the outcome or tell me everything would be okay. She just gave me facts and options, which was exactly what I needed. Dr. Yamaguchi squeezed me in for an emergency appointment 2 days later when I called her office and told her receptionist about the upcoming testimony. She cleared her schedule and had me come in that same afternoon. We sat in her exam room and worked out a detailed plan for managing my heart during the stress of testifying. She adjusted my medication timing so I'd take my beta blocker an hour before going to court instead of with breakfast. She wrote out specific instructions for what to do if I started having symptoms while on the witness stand, including a note for the judge explaining that I might need breaks. She made me promise to bring all my emergency medications to the courthouse in my purse, not locked in my car. Then she printed out my entire cardiac history going back to the bathtub incident, highlighting the parts where doctors had warned Christopher that another shock could kill me. She put everything in a folder and told me to give it to the prosecutor. Before I left, she made me practice my breathing exercises right there in her office until my heart rate came down to normal levels. 2 days later, a voicemail notification popped up on my phone from Christopher's number. I saved it without listening to the whole thing because I could tell from the first few seconds what it was going to be. I called Hannah and told her about it, and she said to forward her the recording. When I finally played it back, Christopher's voice alternated between apologizing for asking me to lie and threatening that he'd make sure everyone knew I was a vindictive ex if I didn't help him. He said he'd tell the court I was mentally unstable, that I'd manipulated him during our relationship, that my heart problems were exaggerated for attention. Then his tone would shift, and he'd beg me to remember the good times, to think about how much we'd meant to each other. The whole message lasted almost 4 minutes. I forwarded it to Hannah like she'd asked, and she responded within an hour telling me to document and save everything else he sent. She said this kind of behavior showed exactly who he was, and it would help the prosecutor's case. In my next therapy session with Lyra, we spent the entire hour practicing grounding techniques I could use if I got triggered on the witness stand. She had me sit in the chair where I'd be sitting and then walk me through the exercises. First, I had to identify all the exits in her office, counting them out loud and describing where each one led. Then she had me notice the texture of the chair fabric, pressing my fingers into it and describing what it felt like. We practiced naming 5 things I could see, 4 things I could hear, 3 things I could touch, 2 things I could smell, and 1 thing I could taste. At first it felt forced and awkward, like I was just going through the motions, but we rehearsed the exercises over and over until they started feeling automatic instead of something I had to think about. Lyra explained that my brain would be looking for ways to escape the stress of testifying, and these techniques would give it something concrete to focus on instead of panicking. By the end of the session, I could run through the whole sequence in under 2 minutes without her prompting me. Sebastian Marston, the prosecutor handling Christopher's case, called me the following week and asked me to come to his office. I drove downtown to the county building and found his office on the 3rd floor. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his mid-30s, with a desk covered in file folders and legal pads. He shook my hand and got right down to business, explaining the rules about what testimony he could actually use from me. He was honest about the limitations, telling me the judge probably wouldn't let me describe the bathtub incident in detail because this trial was about what Christopher did to Clara, not about my past. I could testify about Christopher knowing I had a life-threatening heart condition and knowing that stress could kill me. I could describe his pattern of seeing himself as the victim and blaming others for his choices, but I couldn't tell the jury everything I wanted to tell them about what he'd put me through. Sebastian didn't try to sugarcoat it or promise me I'd get to say my whole story. He just explained the legal reality and asked if I was still willing to testify within those limits. I told him yes, and he made notes on his legal pad about the specific points my testimony would cover. The next Saturday, I drove back to the apartment complex where Christopher and I used to live. I needed copies of our old lease from the management office to prove we'd lived together and that he'd known about my medical condition the whole time. Pulling into the parking lot made my chest feel tight and my breathing got shallow. I sat in my car for a few minutes doing Lyra's grounding techniques, counting the cars I could see and naming their colors out loud. The complex looked exactly the same, with the same faded paint and cracked sidewalk leading to the office. I walked across the parking lot focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. The manager was a woman named Rita who'd worked there for years, and she remembered me right away. She didn't ask any questions when I requested copies of our lease paperwork, just pulled up the records on her computer and printed everything out. She put the papers in a manila envelope and handed them across the counter. I thanked her and walked back to my car, my hands shaking slightly as I unlocked the door and got inside. That evening back at the apartment, I spread the lease paperwork across the kitchen table, and Cameron sat down across from me. He looked at the documents for a minute before speaking. "We need to talk about what this trial is going to do to you." I nodded and waited for him to continue. He explained that he'd support me through testifying, but he couldn't be my only person to lean on, that he had his own limits because of what his dad did to his mom. We spent the next hour making a list of people I could call if things got bad, writing down names and numbers of friends from my support group, my doctor's office, and Hannah's emergency line. Having a concrete plan felt better than just hoping I'd be okay. The next morning, I called the hospital where they'd brought me 4 years ago and requested my complete medical records. The woman on the phone said it would take a week to process and cost $40 for copying fees. I paid with my credit card over the phone, and she confirmed my address for mailing. 8 days later, a thick manila envelope showed up in my mailbox, stuffed so full the flap barely closed. I carried it inside and opened it at the kitchen table, pulling out a stack of papers at least 2 inches thick. The medical terminology was confusing, full of words I didn't understand, but I could follow the timeline clearly enough. The first page showed my arrival time at the emergency room, and the note said, Patient unresponsive, cardiac arrest, resuscitation initiated. Page after page documented every medication they'd given me, every test they'd run, every conversation the doctors had with Christopher about my condition. One section had a note that said patient's fiancé informed multiple times that additional stress could result in sudden cardiac death, followed by the doctor's signature. I took photos of that page with my phone and sent them to Hannah. She called me back within an hour and asked if I could come to her office the next day. When I arrived, she had printed legal documents spread across her desk and a laptop open to a legal research website. She explained that we needed to understand the rules about something called prior bad acts testimony, which meant telling the jury about bad things Christopher did in the past. The judge might not let me describe the bathtub incident in detail, because this trial was about what he did to Clara, not about what he did to me. I felt frustration build in my chest because the jury wouldn't get to hear the whole truth, but Hannah was patient and realistic. She showed me case law examples and explained that I could still testify about Christopher knowing I had a deadly heart condition and knowing that stress could kill me. That would have to be enough. 2 days later, I was making dinner when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. The text said it was Melissa, someone Christopher and I used to know from our old neighborhood. She said Christopher asked her to reach out because he really needed my help, and he was sorry for everything. I didn't respond right away, just took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Hannah. Then I typed back that I couldn't discuss the case and she should stop contacting me. Melissa sent 3 more messages saying I was being unfair, and Christopher was a good person who made mistakes. I took screenshots of those too, sent them to Hannah, and then blocked Melissa's number. Blocking her felt good, like I was finally protecting myself instead of just accepting whatever people threw at me. That night I went to bed early but woke up at 3 in the morning with my heart pounding, so hard I could feel it in my throat. My chest felt tight and I was sure I was having a heart attack. Instead of panicking like I used to, I sat up slowly and reached for my emergency medication on the nightstand. I took 1 pill and then started the breathing exercises Lyra had taught me, counting to 4 on the inhale and 6 on the exhale. I focused on the feeling of the sheets under my hands and named 5 things I could see in the dark room. After 20 minutes, my heart rate came down and the tightness in my chest eased. I'd managed the whole episode by myself without falling apart or waking Cameron. The next afternoon, I was cleaning out my desk drawer when I found the old MP3 player Christopher had used that day in the bathroom. The silver device was scratched and outdated, but it still turned on when I pressed the power button. His poem from 7th grade started playing through the tiny speaker, the same recording I'd heard looping while I was dying on our bathroom floor. I connected the MP3 player to my laptop and copied the audio file, then opened the file properties to check the metadata. The details showed the exact date and timestamps from when Christopher had set the file to repeat, matching perfectly with the day of my dad's funeral. I saved all the technical information in a document and added it to the folder of evidence I was building. Hannah called me the following week and said she'd set up a meeting at her office with Clara and Jay. When I arrived, Clara was already sitting in one of the chairs, and I could see the bruising on her chest through her thin blouse. She was 72 years old with gray hair and tired eyes, and she moved carefully like her ribs still hurt. Jay sat next to her mom looking exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. We didn't talk about graphic details or compare our experiences in some dramatic way. We just acknowledged that we all knew who Christopher really was, and we were all going to tell the truth in court. Clara gave me her phone number and I gave her mine, and then we all left. The pretrial hearing happened on a Tuesday morning in a smaller courtroom than I'd expected. I sat in the back row while Carson Wallace stood up and argued that my testimony was unfair and had nothing to do with Clara's case. He said letting me testify would make the jury hate Christopher based on old relationship drama instead of focusing on the actual charges. Sebastian stood up and calmly explained that Christopher's knowledge of my medical condition went directly to his character and his pattern of behavior. The judge listened to both sides and then ruled that I could testify about Christopher knowing stress could kill me, but I couldn't describe the bathtub scene in detail. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was something. 3 days later, Cameron came with me to Sebastian's office for a preparation session. Sebastian had me sit in a chair facing him while he practiced asking me cross-examination questions, trying to sound harsh and accusatory like Carson Wallace would. We went through different topics, and I noticed which questions made my chest feel tight and my breathing get shallow. Sebastian wrote notes about those triggers and adjusted his approach to be direct, but not unnecessarily cruel. Cameron sat quietly in the corner the whole time, not saying anything but just being there. That Thursday at work, a delivery person showed up at the front desk with a huge bouquet of roses. The receptionist brought them back to my cubicle, and I opened the card to find Christopher's signature at the bottom. My hands started shaking as I carried the flowers to my manager's office. She took one look at my face and asked what was wrong, and I explained about the trial and the restraining order paperwork I was working on. She immediately logged the incident in the company system, took photos of the flowers and card from every angle, and called building security to make sure Christopher's name was added to the banned visitors list. She told me they took workplace safety seriously, and I should report anything else that felt like intimidation or harassment. I thanked her and went back to my desk, feeling protected in a way I never had before. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank piece of notebook paper in front of me and Dad's old reading glasses beside it. I picked up a pen and started writing about the trial and Christopher and how my chest felt tight every time I thought about testifying. I explained that I was doing this partly because Dad always said standing up for what's right matters, even when it's scary, and that I wished he was here to tell me I was doing the right thing. The words came out messy and my handwriting got shaky when I wrote about missing him, but I kept going until I'd filled 2 pages front and back. I folded the letter carefully and put it in an envelope with Dad's name on it, then tucked it into the drawer where I kept his watch and his favorite coffee mug. Writing everything down made my eyes burn with tears, but it also made me feel less alone somehow, like Dad was still listening even though he couldn't answer back. 3 days later, I walked into Lyra's office for our scheduled session, and she had 2 chairs set up facing each other with a small table between them. She explained we were going to try EMDR therapy to help me process the bathtub memory without getting completely overwhelmed by it. I sat down, and she handed me 2 small buzzers that would vibrate alternately in my hands while we worked through the memory. She asked me to think about coming home that day and finding Christopher in the bathtub, then rate how distressing it felt on a scale of 1 to 10. I said 9, and my heart monitor started beeping faster under my shirt. Lyra had me follow her fingers moving back and forth while the buzzers pulsed in my palms, and I described what I remembered seeing. Every few minutes, she'd stop and ask how I was feeling and check my heart rate on the monitor, pausing whenever the numbers climbed too high. We worked through the whole memory in pieces, stopping and starting, and by the end of the session, I'd made it all the way through without dissociating or having a full panic attack. My heart rate came back down to normal after we finished, and Lyra said I did really well. Walking out to my car, I felt exhausted but also stronger. Like maybe I actually could handle sitting in that courtroom after all. The next morning, I opened my work email and typed out a message to my manager requesting unpaid leave for the trial weeks. I explained I had a legal obligation to testify in a court case and needed approximately 2 weeks off, offering to stay available by email for any urgent issues that came up. She responded within an hour, approving the request with the condition that I check my inbox twice daily and respond to anything marked high priority. It wasn't ideal since I'd hoped to fully disconnect, but it was better than trying to work while testifying. My coworkers noticed I'd be gone, but nobody asked questions about why, and I was grateful they respected my privacy instead of pushing for details. And that afternoon, my phone rang with Sebastian's number on the screen. I answered, and he told me Christopher's lawyer had offered a plea deal that would avoid going to trial. The deal involved Christopher pleading guilty to a reduced assault charge in exchange for probation and mandatory counseling. Sebastian said Clara and Jay were split on whether to accept it, with Clara wanting to avoid the stress of testifying, and Jay wanting Christopher to face the full consequences. He explained the decision was ultimately theirs to make and he'd support whatever they chose. I sat with the uncertainty of not knowing what would happen, realizing I didn't get to control the outcome, and that was okay. My testimony might never happen, or it might be crucial, and either way, I'd done what I could by being willing to show up. 2 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize asking if I'd be willing to do a brief interview about my relationship with Christopher. The message was professionally worded, but something about it felt off, so I forwarded it to Hannah and asked her opinion. She called me back within an hour and said it was probably Carson Wallace trying to contact me through unofficial channels, hoping I'd say something helpful to Christopher's case without realizing I was recorded or documented. She advised me to decline any contact outside of my official subpoena and not respond directly to the email. I sent a brief message through Sebastian's office stating that all communication needed to go through the prosecutor and I wouldn't be participating in any informal interviews. At my checkup the following week, Dr. Yamaguchi hooked me up to the heart monitor and frowned slightly at the readout. She pointed to a section of the graph where my heartbeat showed a mild, irregular pattern, then adjusted one of my medications to a slightly higher dose. She said it wasn't dangerous, but we needed to keep a close eye on it given the upcoming stress of testifying. She ordered an ECG for the morning of my testimony so we'd have a baseline to compare if something went wrong during or after I took the stand. Her matter-of-fact approach to my anxiety helped me stay calm instead of spiraling into worst-case scenarios. She printed out the new prescription and told me to start the adjusted dose that evening. With Dr. Yamaguchi's approval, I signed up to audit a self-defense class at the community center the next Saturday morning. I explained to the instructor before class started that I couldn't do any of the physical parts because of my heart condition, but I wanted to learn about boundary setting and threat assessment. She said I could sit on the side and observe, and she'd make sure to explain the concepts behind each technique. I watched as the other students practiced blocking moves and escape holds, taking notes on what the instructor said about recognizing dangerous situations before they escalated. She talked about how strength isn't just physical, it's also about knowing your limits and having a plan, which made sense to me. Learning to think strategically about my safety made me feel less helpless even though I couldn't throw a punch or break someone's grip. That Sunday, a local news website ran a story about Christopher's case with the headline about assault charges against a local man. The article didn't name me but mentioned that his ex-girlfriend might testify about his history of dangerous behavior. I scrolled down to the comments section and immediately regretted it. People were speculating about who I was and what I'd say, with some commenters insisting that women make things up for revenge when relationships end badly. Others defended Clara and said anyone willing to testify against their ex must have a good reason. I closed the browser and reminded myself that strangers' opinions didn't change the truth about what Christopher did to me or to Clara. Over the next few days, I created a simple packet with everything organized for my testimony. I made a timeline of events starting from when Christopher and I met through the bathtub incident and ending when I left. I included a list of all 13 medications I'd been prescribed after my heart damage with the dates and dosages. I wrote a one-page summary of what happened 4 years ago, keeping it factual and straightforward without emotional language. Hannah looked through everything when I brought it to her office and said having it all organized would help me stay focused if I got confused on the stand. The act of putting it together made me feel more in control, like I was preparing for an important test, instead of just hoping I'd remember everything correctly. A week before my scheduled testimony date, I got a message request on social media from an account I didn't recognize. The profile had no photos and had only been created a few days earlier. The message said it was someone who knew me from high school and wanted to reconnect, but something about the writing style felt familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. I read through it carefully and recognized the specific way Christopher always phrased certain things, the particular words he used when he was trying to sound casual. I took screenshots of the profile and the message, reported the account for impersonation, blocked it immediately, and sent all the evidence to both Hannah and Sebastian through email. I felt proud that I didn't engage with him or let him get under my skin, just documented everything and moved on with my day. A few days later, I sat across from Sebastian in his office while he prepared to grill me like I was the enemy. He told me to pretend he was Carson Wallace, and that I needed to stay calm no matter what he said. He started asking if I was bitter about Christopher moving on with someone else, if I wanted revenge for how our relationship ended, if I was making things sound worse than they really were. I practiced giving short answers and then stopping instead of trying to explain everything at once. When he asked why I waited 4 years to come forward, I said I didn't come forward. I was subpoenaed. When he suggested I was exaggerating my heart condition, I just said the medical records speak for themselves. Sebastian nodded after each answer and told me I was doing exactly what I needed to do. The practice made my chest feel tight, but it also made the real thing seem less impossible. We went through different versions of the same questions for almost 2 hours until my responses felt automatic. By the end, I could answer without my voice shaking or my hands trembling as much. That Thursday, the judge held a hearing about what I could actually say on the stand. I sat in the back of the courtroom with Hannah while Carson argued that my testimony was too prejudicial and would make the jury hate Christopher before they heard the facts. Sebastian countered that Christopher's knowledge of my medical condition was directly relevant to his character and his pattern of behavior toward vulnerable people. The judge listened to both sides and then ruled that I could testify about Christopher knowing stress could kill me and about him scaring me afterward, but I couldn't go into graphic detail about the bathtub incident itself. The jury would get special instructions about how to consider my testimony since it was about prior bad acts. Sebastian told me afterward that this was a reasonable outcome, and we should work within these boundaries instead of fighting for more. I felt frustrated that the jury wouldn't hear the whole story, but at least I could say something. The night before my testimony, I barely slept at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself on the witness stand forgetting everything, or having a heart attack in front of everyone. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and pulled out a notebook. I wrote down my testimony in simple bullet points, just the basic facts without any emotional language. Christopher and I dated for 13 years. I have a severe heart condition requiring 13 medications. He knew another shot could kill me. 3 months after the bathtub incident, he jumped out to scare me anyway. I had to crawl to get my medication while he watched. I left that same night. Writing it all down made me feel more prepared, even though I knew the actual questions would probably be different. I read through the bullet points over and over until I could recite them without looking. The sun came up and I still felt anxious, but at least I had a script in my head. Dr. Yamaguchi's office squeezed me in for a baseline ECG at 7 a.m. The nurse attached all the electrodes to my chest and told me to stay still while the machine recorded my heart rhythm. The printout showed my heart rate was elevated from anxiety, but everything else looked stable. Dr. Yamaguchi came in and reviewed the results, then wrote a letter for the court explaining my medical accommodations. She handed me the letter and told me I was stronger than I thought, which made tears start running down my face. She gave me a tissue and reminded me to take my emergency medication with me and to ask for breaks if I needed them. I thanked her and left with the letter folded in my purse next to my pill organizer. Hannah met me at the courthouse entrance at 9 to walk me through everything before the trial started. She showed me where to go through security, where the witness room was located, where all the bathrooms were on that floor, and where the back exit was if I needed to leave quickly. We walked the route from the witness room to the courtroom twice so it would feel familiar when I actually had to do it. She pointed out where the bailiff would be standing if I needed help, where the water pitcher was at the witness stand, and where she would be sitting so I could look at her if I got overwhelmed. The courthouse felt huge and intimidating, but knowing exactly where everything was made it slightly less scary. Hannah reminded me that I could ask the judge for a break at any time, and that no one would think less of me if I needed one. That afternoon, Cameron and I talked about his plan for the trial day. He admitted that sitting in the courtroom might be too hard for him because of his own history with his dad abusing his mom. I told him I understood, and that I didn't want him to push himself past his limits just to support me. We agreed he would wait in the courthouse cafeteria, and I would text him during breaks, so he knew I was okay. He asked if I was sure I didn't need him there, and I said having him nearby, but not forcing himself to watch was exactly what I needed. I appreciated that he knew his boundaries instead of pretending to be fine when he wasn't. We ordered takeout that night and watched a movie to keep my mind off the next day, but I couldn't really focus on anything. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse with my medications in my purse, Dr. Yamaguchi's letter in my hand, and Hannah waiting for me at the security checkpoint. Christopher was in the hallway near the courtroom doors with Carson, and when he saw me, his whole face changed. He tried to catch my eye and started to move toward me, but I looked straight ahead and followed Hannah to the witness room without acknowledging him at all. My heart was beating, so hard I could feel it in my throat. Hannah closed the door behind us, and I sat down in one of the chairs, focusing on my breathing like Lyra taught me. My hands were shaking, but I was here, and I was as ready as I was ever going to be. The trial started with opening statements, and I watched on a video monitor in the witness room. Sebastian stood in front of the jury and laid out the facts of what Christopher did to Clara in clear, simple language. He described how Christopher punched Clara repeatedly in the sternum when she asked him to stop drinking around her daughter, how Clara ended up in the emergency room with severe bruising, and how Christopher showed no remorse afterward. Then Carson got up and argued that Christopher was defending himself from Clara's verbal attack, that her injuries were exaggerated, and that this was a case of mutual conflict blown out of proportion. Listening to him twist everything made my stomach turn and my chest feel tight. I took one of my medications and kept watching. Clara took the stand, and the courtroom went completely quiet. She described coming to her daughter's apartment and finding Christopher drunk in the middle of the afternoon. She said she asked him calmly to stop drinking around her daughter because it was causing problems in their relationship. Christopher got angry and started yelling at her. Then when she didn't back down, he walked up to her and started punching her in the chest over and over. Her voice shook when she talked about the pain and the fear, but she didn't cry, just stated exactly what happened. She showed the jury photos of the bruising on her sternum and talked about the ER visit and the follow-up appointments. The jury looked horrified, and several of them were leaning forward in their seats. I felt proud of Clara for being so strong up there. After Clara finished testifying, the judge called the lawyers up to the bench for a conference. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Carson gesturing and looking frustrated while Sebastian stayed calm. The conference lasted about 10 minutes while everyone in the courtroom just sat there waiting. When the lawyers went back to their tables, the judge spoke directly to Carson and reminded him about the boundaries that had already been set for questioning witnesses. Carson nodded, but he looked angry. The judge called for a 15-minute recess, and I texted Cameron to let him know I was okay so far. The bailiff opened the door to the witness room and called my name. Hannah stood up with me and walked beside me down the hallway until we reached the courtroom doors. She squeezed my arm once, and then I was walking alone down the center aisle with everyone watching. My legs felt shaky, but they kept moving. The bailiff gestured to the witness stand, and I climbed the 2 steps up to the chair. He held out a Bible, and I put my right hand on it while raising my left. I swore to tell the truth, and nothing but the truth, then sat down in the wooden chair that felt too hard under me. I looked at the jury box instead of at Christopher, even though I could feel his eyes on me. My hands were shaking in my lap, but when I stated my name for the record, my voice came out steady and clear. Sebastian stood up from the prosecutor's table and walked toward me with a calm expression. He asked me to state my relationship to the defendant, and I said Christopher was my ex-fiancé. Sebastian asked when our relationship ended, and I told him 4 years ago. He paused and then asked why it ended. I took a breath and explained that Christopher knew I had a severe heart condition that made me vulnerable to sudden cardiac death. I said the doctors had warned him clearly that any stress or shock could kill me. I told the jury that despite knowing this, Christopher had done something that put me in the hospital and nearly killed me. The judge had already ruled I couldn't describe the bathtub scene in detail, so I kept it simple and factual. I said Christopher knew exactly what my medical condition was, and he knew another shock could be fatal. But 3 months after the doctors warned him, he deliberately scared me when I came around a corner in our apartment. The jury members were leaning forward in their seats, and several of them were looking at Christopher with different expressions on their faces. Sebastian thanked me and sat down. Carson Wallace stood up immediately and buttoned his suit jacket as he walked toward the witness stand. He asked if I was here today because I was angry that Christopher had moved on with someone else. I took a breath and paused like Sebastian had taught me in our practice sessions. I said no, that was not true. I was here because I received a subpoena. Carson tried again, suggesting I wanted revenge because Christopher had left me. I kept my answer short and said I left him, not the other way around, and I was simply following the court's order to testify. He asked several more questions, trying to paint me as bitter and vengeful, but I stuck to brief, factual responses without getting defensive or emotional. After about 10 minutes of this, Carson sat down looking frustrated. Sebastian stood up for redirect examination and approached the witness stand with a folder in his hands. He asked the judge for permission to show the jury my medical records from 4 years ago, and the judge nodded. Sebastian opened the folder and showed the jury pages with highlighted sections. He read aloud from the doctor's notes about how they had explicitly warned Christopher that another shock or severe stress could cause sudden cardiac death. He asked me directly if Christopher knew about my heart condition when he scared me around the corner 3 months after I got out of the hospital. I said yes, he absolutely knew, because he had been in the room when the doctors explained everything. Sebastian asked if there was any possibility Christopher didn't understand the seriousness of my condition, and I said no. The doctors had been very clear and very specific about what could kill me. The connection between what Christopher knew back then and what he did to Clara now was obvious to everyone in the courtroom. Sebastian asked me one more question. He asked me to describe Christopher's character based on the 13 years I had known him. I looked directly at Christopher for the first time since sitting down. His face was pale and his hands were gripping the edge of the defense table. I said Christopher was someone who hurt people and then saw himself as the victim. I said he blamed everyone else for the consequences of his own choices and never took real responsibility for the pain he caused. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second. Sebastian thanked me and told the judge he had no further questions. The judge told me I could step down, and I stood up carefully, making sure my legs would hold me. Hannah was waiting at the back of the courtroom, and she guided me out through the side door into a quiet hallway. We walked to a small room with a couch and chairs where I could sit away from everyone. My heart monitor was beeping faster than normal, and Hannah helped me check the readings on my phone app. The numbers were elevated but not in the danger zone. I used the breathing techniques Lyra had taught me, counting 4 counts in and 6 counts out until my heart rate started coming down. Hannah brought me water and I took one of my emergency pills just to be safe. I felt completely exhausted like I had run a marathon, but I also felt relieved that I had said what I needed to say. Hannah told me I did really well up there and that my testimony was powerful. Over the next 3 days, the trial continued with more witnesses and closing arguments. I didn't go back to the courtroom, but Hannah kept me updated by text. She said the jury looked serious during deliberations and everyone was expecting them to come back with a verdict soon. But then on the 4th day, Hannah called me and said Carson had approached Sebastian about a plea deal. Christopher would plead guilty to a reduced assault charge instead of going to trial. In exchange, he would get 3 years of supervised probation instead of prison time. He would also have to complete a year of batterer intervention classes and 6 months of alcohol treatment. The deal included a permanent no-contact order protecting both Clara and me, meaning Christopher couldn't contact either of us ever again for any reason. Hannah said Clara and Jay were meeting with Sebastian to decide whether to accept the deal. She explained that going to trial was risky because juries were unpredictable, and there was always a chance Christopher could be found not guilty. A few hours later, Sebastian called and said Clara and Jay had agreed to accept the plea deal. He said it wasn't the prison sentence they had hoped for, but it was real consequences and real protection. 2 weeks later, I went back to the courthouse for the sentencing hearing. This time I sat in the gallery with Clara and Jay while Christopher stood in front of the judge. The judge asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement, and I said yes. I walked up to the microphone and read from the paper I had prepared. I talked about how Christopher's abuse had affected my health and nearly killed me. I said his pattern of hurting people and refusing to take responsibility had continued for years. I said I hoped the court would hold him accountable so he couldn't do this to anyone else. When I finished, I walked back to my seat without looking at Christopher. Clara gave her statement next, describing the physical pain from the assault and the fear she still felt. The judge listened to everything and then sentenced Christopher to 3 years of supervised probation with strict conditions. He had to complete batterer intervention classes for a year and alcohol treatment for 6 months. He had to pay all of Clara's medical bills and court costs. The judge made the no-contact order permanent and said any violation would result in immediate jail time. It wasn't prison, but watching Christopher's face fall as the judge read the sentence felt like something. A week after sentencing, Hannah arranged a meeting at her office with Clara, Jay, and me. We sat around a small conference table and exchanged phone numbers. Clara gave me information about a support group for domestic violence survivors that met twice a month. Jay shared the name of her therapist who specialized in trauma. I told them about the cardiac support group I attended and the resources Dr. Yamaguchi had given me about stress management. There was no dramatic bonding moment or group hug. We were just 3 women who had survived the same man, sharing practical information about how to stay safe and keep healing. Before we left, Clara squeezed my hand and thanked me for testifying. I told her she was brave for pressing charges in the first place. A month after the trial ended, I had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Yamaguchi. She did a full cardiac exam with an ECG and an echocardiogram. When she showed me the results on her computer screen, she was smiling. My heart function had actually improved slightly from my last exam 6 months ago. It wasn't a huge change, but it was measurable improvement. Dr. Yamaguchi said she felt comfortable reducing one of my medications under careful supervision. She explained that successfully managing the stress of the trial without a major cardiac event proved how much stronger my heart had gotten. She said the improvement was likely due to reduced chronic stress now that I was away from Christopher and in a healthier relationship with Cameron. I left her office feeling like I had won something small but real. When I got home that afternoon, Cameron was making dinner in the kitchen and asked how the appointment went. I told him about the improved heart function and the medication reduction while I set my purse down on the counter. He smiled and said that was great news, then turned back to stirring something on the stove. We ate together at our small table, and I brought up something that had been on my mind since the trial ended. I said I didn't want to make any big life changes right now, that I just wanted to focus on small things that felt manageable. Cameron nodded and said he felt the same way, that we should take things slow and steady. He suggested maybe planning a weekend trip somewhere quiet next month, nothing fancy or stressful. I liked that idea, and we talked about what we each needed going forward, how we could support each other without losing ourselves in the process. He said his boundary was keeping his therapy appointments separate and having his own friend time, and I said mine was maintaining my medical routines without feeling guilty about them. The conversation felt healthy and real, like we were actually partners instead of one person taking care of the other. After dinner, I helped him clean up the dishes, and we watched a movie on the couch before bed, just normal couple stuff that felt good because it was simple. That Saturday morning, I drove to the cemetery where Dad was buried. The weather was sunny and warm, not the gray, rainy day I expected for something like this. I parked in the small lot and walked across the grass to his headstone, carrying a folded piece of paper in my pocket. When I got there, I knelt down and pulled out the note I had written the night before. I told him I had testified in court and that I was okay, that Christopher was being held accountable for what he did. I wrote about Cameron and how he helped me build a life that actually felt safe instead of constantly scary. I told Dad about my improved heart function and how Dr. Yamaguchi said I was getting stronger. The note wasn't long or poetic, just honest updates about my life like I was catching him up on things. I folded it back up and tucked it under a small rock near his headstone so the wind wouldn't blow it away. The grief I felt sitting there wasn't the sharp pain from right after he died, more like a steady ache that I could carry alongside everything else. I stayed for a few more minutes just sitting in the quiet, then stood up and walked back to my car. On the drive home, I stopped at a coffee shop and got myself something sweet, feeling like Dad would have wanted me to do something nice for myself. That night, after I got back to the apartment, I pulled out the cardboard box from my closet and filed away all the court documents from Christopher's case. I labeled the box with a marker and pushed it to the back corner where I wouldn't see it every day. Then I walked to the kitchen and updated the emergency contact list on the fridge, making sure Cameron's number was first and adding Hannah's office number as a backup. I pulled out my phone and went through all my social media accounts, double-checking that Christopher was blocked on everything, and his number was still blocked in my phone. After that, I took my evening medications one by one, swallowing each pill with water and checking them off on my daily tracker. I set my alarm for the next morning and plugged my phone in to charge on the nightstand. Cameron was already in bed reading something on his tablet when I climbed under the covers next to him. He reached over and squeezed my hand once before going back to his reading. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing, doing the techniques Lyra taught me to calm my heart rate down. My body relaxed into the mattress and I felt my mind start to drift. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without any nightmares, just peaceful darkness until morning. And that's the story. I know it was heavy, but I'm so glad we went through it together. If you're dealing with something similar, please know you're not alone. Drop a like if this resonated with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of your heart, okay?
This isn't cheating, it's polyamory. You're just too insecure to get it, she said. So I said, we're done, and left. Now she realizes it was just cheating, and she's all alone. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. Hey Reddit, throwaway account here because this whole saga still feels too raw to attach my real name to it. I'm a 32-year-old guy who thought he had a solid thing going with my girlfriend of 4 years, Emma. We met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of building a life together. I work in tech, stable job, good pay, nothing flashy, but I always put her first. When she was struggling with her graphic design freelance gigs, I covered rent for months so she could focus. When she started therapy last year to deal with some anxiety, I encouraged it, even drove her to sessions, and sat in the waiting room. Hell, I skipped a promotion that would have meant relocating because she wasn't ready to move. I was all in, loyal to a fault, thinking we were on the same page about monogamy and commitment. But about 6 months ago, things started feeling off. Emma was glued to her phone more than usual, giggling at texts when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd come home late from networking events, smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe it was work stress or her therapy breakthroughs making her distant. But then I saw a notification pop up on her laptop one night while she was in the shower. A message from some guy named Jake saying, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait for round 2. My stomach dropped. I didn't snoop further. That was enough. I waited until she came out, towel drying her hair, and confronted her calmly over dinner. I wasn't yelling or accusing, just laid out what I'd seen and asked for the truth. That's when she hit me with the line that's burned into my brain. This isn't cheating, it's polyamory. You're just too insecure to get it. I stared at her across the kitchen table, the pasta I'd made growing cold between us. What are you talking about, Emma? We've never discussed anything like that. Polyamory? Since when? She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with this smug little smile, like she was explaining colors to a blind person. Look, my therapist has been helping me explore my needs. Monogamy is so restrictive, it's like society's way of controlling us. Jake and I connected at that design conference last month, and it just feels natural. Poly means I can love multiple people without it being a big deal. You're making it one because of your insecurities. I felt like the floor was tilting. Insecurities? Emma, we've been exclusive for years. You never mentioned wanting to open things up. This feels like you're rewriting the rules after breaking them. She rolled her eyes, sipping her wine. See, that's the close-minded thinking I'm talking about. Therapy taught me that true love isn't possessive. If you really cared about my growth, you'd support this. Jake gets it. He's enlightened, not stuck in outdated norms like you. We're not sneaking around. I'm being honest now. You should try being more open instead of judging. Honest now, after you've already started seeing him. My voice stayed even, but inside, it was like a punch to the gut. I'd supported her through everything, her breakdowns, her career slumps. And this was how she repaid it? By weaponizing her therapy sessions to justify sneaking around? Exactly, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I didn't tell you earlier because I knew you'd react like this. All jealous and traditional. Polyamory isn't cheating, it's ethical non-monogamy. Read a book or something. If you can't handle it, maybe you're not as evolved as I thought. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. So what? You want me to just accept this? Date other people too? She shrugged. If you want. Or not. But I'm not stopping. Jake makes me feel alive in ways you don't anymore. It's not about you being bad. It's about me needing more. The conversation dragged on for another half hour, her piling on the buzzwords like boundaries and emotional intelligence, all while making me feel like some Neanderthal for expecting fidelity. I didn't beg or yell. I just listened, nodding occasionally, as the realization sank in. This wasn't a discussion. It was her declaring war on our relationship under the guise of self-discovery. By the end, I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said, "Okay, Emma, if that's how you feel, we're done. I'll crash at a friend's tonight and come back for my stuff tomorrow." Her eyes widened for a split second, like she hadn't expected me to call her bluff. "Wait, that's it? You're just leaving? No fighting for us." I paused at the door. "What's there to fight for? You've already chosen." And with that, I walked out. No dramatic exit, no slamming doors, just quiet acceptance that the woman I loved had turned into someone I didn't recognize. The next day, I showed up with a couple of boxes while she was at work. I packed my clothes, books, the coffee maker I'd bought, essentials only. Left the key on the counter with a note. Rent's paid through the month. Good luck. Then I blocked her on everything. Phone, social media, email. No lingering ties, no room for second guessing. I crashed on my buddy Mark's couch for a week until I found a short-term rental in the same mid-sized city we'd called home. Didn't tell mutual friends the details at first. Just said we'd split amicably. But amicable? That was a lie I told myself to keep it together. The first few weeks were brutal. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, replaying her words, wondering if I really was too insecure or close-minded. Had I missed signs? Flashbacks hit hard, like the time last winter when she had a panic attack, and I held her for hours, whispering reassurances until she fell asleep. Or when I surprised her with tickets to that art exhibit she'd been dying to see, just to watch her face light up. I'd given so much, sacrificed little pieces of myself, and for what? To be dismissed as unevolved. I didn't lash out or badmouth her. Instead, I threw myself into therapy. Ironic, right? Found a counselor online who specialized in breakups, and we unpacked how she'd gaslit me with all that therapy speak. It's manipulation, my therapist said. She used trendy labels to avoid accountability. That helped. I started hitting the gym, something I neglected while prioritizing her schedule. Picked up hiking on weekends, exploring trails outside the city where the fresh air cleared my head. Work-wise, I finally pursued that promotion I'd passed on before. Turns out, my boss was thrilled, and it came with a raise and remote flexibility. But the silence was the hardest part. No contact meant no closure, just me sitting with the unfairness. Mutual friends started reaching out, fishing for details. A couple sided with her at first, texting things like, "Emma said you couldn't handle her growth." Harsh, man. It stung, but I kept responses neutral. We wanted different things. Deep down, the confusion ate at me. Was polyamory really her thing, or just an excuse? Why spring it on me like that? I journaled a lot, letting the vulnerability pour out on paper so it didn't fester. Slowly, the fog lifted. I realized her betrayal wasn't about my flaws, it was hers. And in that quiet detachment, I started rebuilding. No rebounds, no revenge plots. Just me, focusing on becoming someone she couldn't touch. About 2 months in, the whispers started trickling back through the grapevine. Emma had tried to define the relationship with Jake, pushing for that poly setup she'd preached about. Turns out, he wasn't buying it. From what I heard via a neutral friend, he'd laughed in her face during a dinner date. "Poly? Babe, I thought we were just having fun. I'm not looking for anything serious. You're a side thing." Dumped her on the spot, blocked her, and moved on to his next conquest. She'd been played hard. Karma didn't stop there. Without me as her safety net, her freelance gigs dried up. Turns out, all that networking with Jake hadn't led to real opportunities. She lost a big client because she was too distracted, and her anxiety flared up again, but now without my support. Friends who'd initially defended her journey started distancing themselves when the truth spread. It wasn't ethical polyamory. It was plain old cheating with a trendy label. She ended up isolated, crashing on her sister's couch, posting vague social media stories about lessons in love that screamed regret. I didn't gloat or reach out, just kept building my life. New apartment, better routines, even started dating casually, meeting women who valued monogamy without the drama. The unfairness still lingered in quiet moments, but it fueled my growth instead of holding me back. Little by little, I felt the weight lift. Then the attempt started. First, it was a text from an unknown number, her sister's. "Hey, this is Lisa. Emma's been going through a rough time. She realizes she messed up with the whole poly thing. Can you talk to her? She's learned about real boundaries now." I read it twice, feeling a flicker of that old confusion, but shut it down. "Not interested. Please don't contact me again." Blocked. A week later, Emma herself found a way around the blocks, probably a new number. She called while I was at the gym, leaving a voicemail. "Hey, it's me. I know you're mad, but Jake was a mistake. He didn't get it either. I thought poly was the answer, but it was just me being confused. Can we meet? I miss what we had." Therapy's helping me see I was wrong to spring it on you like that. Desperation crept into her voice, but I didn't call back. Deleted it and kept lifting weights. Things escalated from there. Her mom emailed me. Yeah, she dug up my work address somehow. "Dear, my name. Emma's family is worried about her. She's not eating, not sleeping. That Jake guy used her, and now she's alone. You two were so good together. She says she understands monogamy now. Give her another chance. It's the mature thing to do." Mature? The irony burned. I replied curtly. "Respectfully, this isn't my problem. Do not contact me further." Forwarded it to my therapist for a laugh. But Emma didn't stop. A couple weeks after that, she showed up at my new apartment. Must have gotten the address from a mutual who'd slipped up. I opened the door to her standing there, eyes red-rimmed, hair a mess, holding a takeout bag like some peace offering. "Can I come in? Please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I need to explain. The poly thing, it wasn't real. I was just exploring, like my therapist suggested. But Jake laughed at me when I tried to make it official. Said I was clingy. Now I'm all alone, and I see what I lost. You were always there for me. Let's try again. I'll do monogamy your way." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, feeling nothing but calm detachment. "Emma, you made your choice. Now live with it." Her face twisted, shifting from apologetic to angry in seconds. "That's it? After everything? You're so cold. I thought you loved me. This is your insecurity talking again, punishing me for growing. My friends say you're being unfair. Even my sister thinks you owe me closure. How can you just throw us away?" "Throw us away?" I echoed evenly. "That's what you did, remember? With your enlightened excuses." She stepped closer, voice rising. "Fine, be that way. But you'll regret it when you realize no one else will put up with your boring routine. I was trying to evolve us, and you bailed. The hypocrisy hung in the air, but I didn't engage. Just said, "Goodbye, Emma," and closed the door. Heard her banging for a minute before she stormed off. That was the last direct attempt, but it showed her true colors. Desperate one moment, vicious the next. I let out a breath, leaning against the door. The confusion from those early days was gone. In its place was clarity. She'd unraveled, just like her flimsy justifications. And me? I was free. Update. For months post-breakup, life kept moving forward for me. With the promotion secured, I was traveling more for work, conferences in other cities, networking that actually built my career instead of derailing it. I upgraded to a nicer apartment downtown, one with a view of the river that reminded me to keep flowing. Dating picked up too. I met a woman named Sarah through a hiking group. Kind, straightforward, no games. We weren't serious yet, but her company was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that relationships could be simple and respectful. Meanwhile, Emma's downward spiral continued, pieced together from occasional updates I couldn't avoid. After Jake dumped her, she tried to salvage her poly narrative on social media, posting quotes about self-love and ethical relationships. But the facade cracked fast. Mutual friends shared that she'd alienated most of our circle. Turns out, when the details leaked, her cheating framed as exploration, people saw through it. One friend told me she'd shown up at a group hangout, ranting about how misunderstood she was, only to get shut down. Her freelance work tanked further. Clients bailed after she missed deadlines, blaming it on her emotional journey. Last I heard, she was back living with her parents, scraping by on odd jobs, her anxiety worse than ever without a support system. It was ironic, really. Her so-called evolution left her more isolated than before. I didn't seek out the info. It just found me through the grapevine. And honestly, it didn't bring joy or vindication, just a quiet confirmation that actions have consequences. I'd spent those months sitting with the unfairness, processing how she'd manipulated therapy lingo to justify betrayal. My own sessions helped me see it clearly. It wasn't polyamory, it was avoidance. Karma had hit, not as some cosmic revenge, but as the natural fallout of her choices. She was alone, unraveling, while I was piecing together a stronger version of myself. Update. 6 months post-breakup, the desperation peaks. The attempts didn't fully stop after that apartment showdown. For a while, it was radio silence, but then her family ramped up. Her dad called from a block number one evening while I was cooking dinner. I answered without thinking. "Hello? Is this my name?" His voice was gruff, like he was reading from a script. "Yeah, who's this?" "It's Emma's father." "Look, son, she's in a bad way. That Jake fella used her and tossed her aside. She's realized the poly nonsense was a mistake. Says she was influenced by bad advice from her therapist. Her mom's worried sick. Emma's not leaving the house much. Family thinks you two should talk. You were good for her stability." I set the spatula down, keeping my tone even. "I appreciate the concern, but that's not my role anymore. Emma made her decisions." He huffed. "Come on, be reasonable. She's begging us to reach out. Says she understands now, wants real monogamy, boundaries and all. You're throwing away years over one slip-up? Her sister Lisa says you're acting controlling, blocking everyone." "That's not mature." "Controlling?" I echoed mildly, noting the hypocrisy. "Sounds familiar. Tell Emma to focus on her own growth. Goodbye." I hung up and blocked the number. It was classic, her enablers twisting the narrative, just like she had. A few days later, another voicemail from an unknown contact, this time from her best friend Kara, who I'd always found pushy. "Hey, it's Kara. Emma's a mess, dude. She's crying all the time, regretting everything. Jake was abusive, gaslighting her about the poly stuff. She knows she hurt you, but she's changed. Therapy's for real this time. Her family's hounding her to fix it. Can you at least meet for coffee? She promises no pressure. Don't be heartless. She needs closure." Heartless? After her smug dismissal, I deleted it without responding. The desperation was escalating, from apologetic pleas to guilting through proxies, revealing how little they'd respected my boundaries. Then came the angry phase. About a week after Kara's message, Emma emailed me from a new account, subject line, "You owe me this. I can't believe you're ignoring everyone. My family says you're being petty and insecure, just like I thought. Jake exposed what a fool I was. But you're no better, ghosting me when I need support. I admitted I was wrong about Polly. It was just cheating, okay? Happy now? But you walking away without fighting shows you never cared. Let's talk like adults, or are you too evolved for that? If you don't reply, I'll show up at your work. This isn't over. The threat in her words showed her true colors fully, manipulative, entitled, flipping from victim to aggressor. I forwarded it to my therapist and a lawyer friend, just in case, but didn't engage. Instead, I archived it and went for a run, letting the rhythm pound out any lingering doubt. Her attempts had gone from sad to toxic, mirroring the betrayal that started it all. I was done being her emotional crutch. Final update. 8 months post-breakup. The party had all culminated at our mutual friend Mark's birthday party, a casual backyard gathering at his place outside the city. I debated going, knowing Emma might show, but Mark assured me she'd been uninvited after her earlier drama. Still, there she was, slipping in late, looking gaunt and disheveled in a rumpled dress, clutching a gift bag like a shield. Our eyes met across the fire pit, and she beelined over while I was chatting with Sarah and a few others. "My name, thank God you're here," she said, voice low but urgent, ignoring the group. "We need to talk." Privately, I turned, keeping my expression neutral. "Emma, this isn't the time or place." She glanced at Sarah, eyes narrowing, then back to me. "Who's she? Anyway, listen, I've hit rock bottom. Jake was a user. He never wanted Polly, just sex. I see now it was all cheating, my fault entirely. Therapy's taught me boundaries for real this time. I understand what I lost. You were loyal, stable. Let's rebuild. I'll do whatever it takes." Her words rushed out, desperate, hypocritical after months of excuses. The group shifted awkwardly, but I stayed composed, sipping my beer. "Emma," I said calmly, reflecting her logic back. "I've decided I'm in a monogamous relationship with my own peace and happiness. I'm just not emotionally available for anyone else right now. You should understand that." Her face crumpled, then flushed with anger. "What? Throwing my words back at me? That's cruel. Look at you, new job, new girl, acting all superior. My family's right, you're heartless. I came here to apologize, to fix us." "There's no us to fix," I replied firmly, focusing on my growth. "I've built a life where you're irrelevant. Thriving career, real connections, no more confusion or manipulation. You're a chapter closed, Emma. Move on." She stood there, mouth agape, as the irony hit, her public unraveling on display while I mingled effortlessly, Sarah by my side. Mutual friends exchanged glances, the truth evident. She muttered something about me regretting it and stormed off, leaving the party early. It was the final reversal, her desperation exposed, my indifference complete. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.
I thought the night was supposed to be about me. After all, I had just been promoted to major in the U.S. Army, and my mom insisted on having a family dinner to celebrate. Nothing too fancy, just a sit-down meal at a nice restaurant in San Antonio. My sister Lena somehow turned it into her own show. She booked a big table, invited half the people she knew from her social circle, and strutted around like she was hosting a political fundraiser. When I walked in, I noticed how she made sure to sit at the center spot right next to my mom, like she was the guest of honor. I tried to ignore it. I've spent enough years in uniform to know how to keep my emotions off my face. A soldier doesn't blow up in public. But inside, I had a bad feeling. The waiter led me over, and I spotted an open chair beside my mom. I smiled, started walking toward it, and that's when Lena slammed her palm down on the table and raised her voice so everyone in the room could hear. "This table is for the family," she snapped. "Get outside." For a second, I thought she was joking. Who yells something like that in a restaurant, in front of their own mother, friends, and half the neighborhood? But Lena had that look chin lifted, smug little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, daring me to argue. The chatter in the room stopped cold. Every head turned my way. A couple of my army buddies who'd come to celebrate froze, caught between pretending they didn't hear it and wanting to defend me. Some of Lena's friends giggled like middle school kids watching a cafeteria fight. I just stood there. My first instinct was to remind her that I had earned the right to sit wherever the hell I wanted. But the discipline drilled into me over the years kept me in check. When you've dealt with screaming drill sergeants, angry colonels, and exhausted soldiers ready to quit, you learn not to give people like Lena the satisfaction of watching you lose your cool. Instead, I quietly pulled out the chair and sat down anyway. My mom gave me a weak smile, but she didn't say anything. Her arthritis was bad that week, and the last thing she wanted was to get caught in the middle of one of Lena's performances. Lena glared at me, but with everyone staring, she turned back to her glass of wine, as if she had already won. Dinner dragged on. I could feel eyes on me every time I lifted my fork. Lena kept the spotlight on herself, bragging about how she had managed the entire dinner, how exhausting it was to host, and how grateful Mom should be for everything she did. She tossed in a few digs about how some people don't understand what real responsibility looks like because they're always away at work. It didn't take a genius to know she was talking about me. Then came the kicker. When dessert plates were cleared, the waiter walked over with the check. He didn't put it in front of Lena, who had ordered half the bottles of wine on the bill. He didn't put it in front of her boyfriend Eric, who had spent the evening on his phone pretending he was too busy to notice the tension. No, the waiter placed the leather folder right in front of me. $2,000. The table went silent again, and this time I heard a chuckle from someone at Lena's end. "Well, Major, I guess rank has its privileges," one of her friends said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I didn't move right away. I just looked at the bill, then at Lena. She smirked like she had pulled off the perfect ambush. She wanted me humiliated twice in one night, first excluded from the table, then stuck paying for her little show. I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Without a word, I slid the folder back across the table toward the waiter. He blinked, glanced at me, then at Lena, and for a moment the whole table froze like someone had hit pause. My silence was louder than anything I could have shouted. That was the point when I felt something shift. I wasn't the one being humiliated anymore. Lena thought she'd embarrassed me in front of everyone, but what she really did was expose herself. People who barely knew us now saw her for what she was: loud, controlling, and desperate for attention. I sat back, folded my hands, and let the tension hang in the air. The waiter, clearly uncomfortable, turned and set the bill down right in front of Lena. Her face flushed red, and Eric finally looked up from his phone, realizing he might actually be expected to do something. I didn't need to say a thing. Sometimes silence is sharper than any comeback. The rest of the dinner was stiff, awkward, and painfully quiet. People went back to picking at their food, laughing too hard at small jokes, trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed a family crack open in public. My army buddies gave me side-eye, the kind that says, "You good?" without words. I gave a small nod. I wasn't good, but I wasn't broken either. Walking out of that restaurant later, I kept my face steady. Years of military training had taught me how to march through storms without blinking, but inside I was boiling. The humiliation stung, not because of the crowd, not even because of the money, but because it came from my own sister. That night marked the line in the sand. Lena wanted to make it clear that I didn't belong at the family table. Fine. If she wanted to treat me like an outsider, she'd learn exactly what that meant when I stopped playing by her rules. The drive home that night was quiet except for the buzzing in my head. Every mile I put between me and that restaurant, the heavier the silence felt. By the time I walked into Mom's house, I wasn't even hungry anymore. The humiliation had burned right through my appetite, and all that was left was a knot in my stomach. Mom shuffled into the kitchen with her slippers, asking softly if I wanted tea. She always did that after arguments, like tea could somehow undo the poison Lena spread. I told her no, and leaned against the counter, arms crossed, trying to stop my jaw from clenching. She didn't say Lena's name, but we both knew that's what she was thinking about. It wasn't like Lena suddenly turned into this person. She'd been building to it for years, little by little, always pushing boundaries. Growing up, she had a way of making everything hers. Toys, friends, even attention at school if Lena wanted it, she claimed it, and if you got in her way, she'd make you regret it. Back then, I thought it was just normal sibling rivalry. I figured she'd outgrow it. Instead, she refined it. Dad used to be the referee. He was quiet, steady, the type who never raised his voice but always knew how to shut an argument down with just a look. After he passed, things shifted fast. Lena stepped in like she was the new head of the household, and Mom was too tired and too grief-stricken to challenge it. I was already enlisted, bouncing between training cycles and deployments, so Lena's grip tightened while I was gone. When I did come back home for short stints, the house felt different. Mom tiptoed around her own kitchen. Mail that used to be stacked on the hall table now disappeared into Lena's room. Bills came later not at all, and whenever I asked about them, Lena waved me off with some smart comment like, "Don't worry about it, soldier. We've got it handled here." Or panic. One night, a few years back, I tried to pay the electric bill online and found out the login didn't work anymore. Lena had changed all the accounts to make it easier. I let it go because I was getting ready to deploy again. I told myself she was helping, stepping up for Mom while I was away. That's how manipulation works, it hides behind convenience. I kept pushing it aside, focusing on my job. Serving meant I wasn't around for family dinners or PTA-style gossip sessions, so I wasn't there to see the daily digs Lena dropped on Mom. I wasn't there to see how she turned neighbors into her personal audience, bragging about how she was basically running 2 households, her own mess of a life with Eric and Mom's. By the time I did hear about it, it was already too late to stop the pattern. Mom once confessed to me over coffee that she felt like a guest in her own house. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't deny what I saw every time I walked through the door. Lena holding the remote. Lena telling her which doctor's appointments she should cancel because it's too expensive. Lena deciding who came over and when. It wasn't caring, it was control, dressed up as responsibility. And the crazy part? Mom defended her most of the time. She said things like, "She's trying her best," or "She's just under pressure." That night after the restaurant, she even muttered, "Your sister means well. She just has a temper." I almost laughed. A temper doesn't make someone throw their own flesh and blood out of a family dinner. That's not heat of the moment anger. That's deliberate. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the fridge door covered in magnets from my duty stations. Germany, Korea, Fort Hood. Each one was a reminder of where I'd been and what I'd missed while Lena tightened her grip back home. It was more than jealousy. She didn't just resent that I had a career, a paycheck, and a sense of direction. She resented that I left and came back stronger every time. In her mind, she was the one holding things together. But in reality, she was just rearranging pieces to suit herself. Mom had always been the reason I stayed quiet. As long as she wasn't in danger, I figured I could handle the jabs, the eye rolls, the passive-aggressive comments. But the look on her face at the restaurant told me she wasn't just embarrassed for me. She was scared of Lena's anger turning on her. That hit harder than anything Lena could say to my face. Eric didn't help either. He was the type of guy who always had a scheme. He'd show up with half-baked business ideas, always just about to take off, but somehow never making rent on time. I overheard him once talking about using Mom's house as collateral for something, and when I confronted him, he laughed it off like I was paranoid. That laugh stuck with me, though. It wasn't the laugh of someone who was joking. It was the laugh of someone who thought he'd already won. I realized Lena had been rehearsing that restaurant stunt for years. Every eye roll, every bill she hid, every time she reminded Mom that I wasn't around, those were dress rehearsals for the moment she could finally shove me out in public and claim the stage for herself. Standing in that kitchen with Mom, I promised myself one thing. Lena might control the house while I was gone, but she wasn't going to control me, not anymore. The first real crack showed up a few weeks later when Mom handed me a letter she didn't understand. It was from the bank. Thick envelope, official stamp across the top. She slid it across the kitchen table like it was something toxic. Her voice was quiet when she asked, "Can you read this for me?" The letter was about a late payment on a line of credit. I frowned because I knew Mom didn't have a line of credit. Her only accounts were her checking and savings, the ones she barely touched except for groceries and prescriptions. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. It was clear. Someone had opened a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, using her house as collateral. The balance was already over $100,000. I looked up at her. She was wringing her hands, waiting for me to explain. My first thought was maybe it was a mistake, some kind of paperwork error, but the pit in my stomach told me it wasn't. "Did you sign anything with the bank recently?" I asked. Mom shook her head so fast I knew she was telling the truth. Lena walked in just then. all casual with her coffee mug, like she didn't hear the tension filling the room. She spotted the letter on the table and her smile froze for just a second before she covered it with a sip of coffee. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand. "I took care of it. No big deal." "No big deal?" I almost laughed. 6 figures tied to Mom's house wasn't exactly pocket change. I asked her how she took care of it, and she launched into a rehearsed spiel about how she had power of attorney, how she used it to restructure finances, so Mom could be more comfortable. She made it sound like she had done everyone a favor. Mom's face went pale, like she only then realized what power of attorney really meant in Lena's hands. I remembered signing the papers with her a couple years ago, back when I was preparing for deployment. It seemed practical at the time. If anything happened to me, Lena could help Mom handle things. I never thought she'd use it to gamble with Mom's house. I didn't explode right there. Military training teaches you how to control your face even when you want to rip the walls down. I kept my voice steady, asked her what she did with the money. She smiled that smug smile she's perfected since childhood and said it was invested. I asked in what. She muttered something about an LLC, a family venture, and told me not to worry about details I wouldn't understand. That's when my hands started shaking under the table. Not from fear, from restraint. Every instinct in me screamed to call her bluff, to demand receipts, but I knew yelling wouldn't get me the truth. So I just nodded and said, I'd look into it myself. Over the next few days, I started digging. I pulled Mom's mail before Lena could snatch it, opened every envelope, combed through every notice. What I found was worse than I expected. Not just the HELOC, but late fees, overdraft charges, insurance policies being switched around without Mom's knowledge. All of it tied back to Lena's signature under the power of attorney. Mom asked me quietly one night if we were in danger of losing the house. I couldn't bring myself to answer. I just squeezed her hand and told her I'd handle it. Inside, though, I was boiling. The house wasn't just property, it was the last piece of Dad. He built that back porch with his own hands, fixed the roof himself every time it leaked. Losing it because Lena decided to play banker? Unthinkable. One afternoon, I caught Eric in the driveway, talking too loudly on his phone. He was bragging about a cash infusion and how their business was about to explode. I stayed out of sight until he hung up, then asked him directly if he was talking about the HELOC money. He gave me that greasy grin and said, "It's all under control, Major. Don't sweat it." Hearing my rank come out of his mouth like a punchline made my skin crawl. I realized then it wasn't just Lena. She and Eric were a team, and Mom's house was their piggy bank. I took the next step the way I'd approach a mission. Carefully, with evidence. I requested copies of all the bank paperwork. It took some convincing, but when I showed the bank manager my ID and explained I was Mom's daughter, and also on the POA file, he finally pulled them up. Sure enough, Lena's name was everywhere. She'd opened the HELOC 6 months earlier, drawn out $120,000, and funneled it through a shell LLC registered to her and Eric. The LLC had some generic name like Monroe Ventures. Nothing that actually meant anything. No real business, no employees, no product, just a mailbox address at a strip mall and a checking account bleeding money. I drove home with the copies stacked on the passenger seat, my jaw clenched so tight I gave myself a headache. Lena and Eric weren't just irresponsible. They were stealing. From Mom. From me. From the family. That night, I watched Mom sleep in her recliner, soft snore, blanket slipping off her shoulders. She trusted us to take care of her, and here we were, one daughter robbing her blind, the other scrambling to patch holes in a sinking ship. I felt ashamed for ever signing that POA, ashamed I hadn't questioned sooner. But shame wasn't going to save the house. Evidence would. The next morning, I told Mom I was going to run errands, and instead met with a lawyer I knew from my reserve unit, Captain Whitaker. Sharp. No nonsense. The kind of officer who never sugarcoated a thing. I showed him the bank papers. He didn't even blink before saying, "This is elder financial abuse, clear as day." Hearing those words made the situation real in a way it hadn't been before. Abuse. Not bad judgment. Not a family spat abuse. Whitaker said I had 2 choices. Confront Lena directly or start building a legal case that would stand up in court. He recommended the latter. Quiet investigation, document everything, get witnesses if possible. Walking out of his office, I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. Lena had crossed into criminal territory, and Eric, with his constant business deals, was dragging her deeper. By the time I pulled back into Mom's driveway, Lena's car was already there. I saw her silhouette in the living room window, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. She was probably spinning another one of her stories. For once, though, I didn't feel cornered. I felt focused. I decided to act like I believed Lena's excuses while I moved forward quietly. Pretending to buy her family venture story gave me time to put real pressure where it mattered evidence. That's when I called a private investigator. His name was Samir Patel, a former cop who'd traded night shifts for stakeouts with a camera. He worked out of a cramped office above a pawn shop, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. Samir had seen his share of family messes, but once I laid the paperwork on his desk, his eyebrows shot up. "This isn't sloppy bookkeeping," he said, flipping through the copies of the HELOC withdrawal slips. "This is structured. She's funneling money through an LLC, and that's intentional." I explained the power of attorney, the fact that Lena had legal access. He nodded slowly. "Legal access doesn't mean moral or smart. What she's doing fits the pattern of elder financial abuse. You'll need more than paperwork. You'll need to show intent." So we set up a plan. Samir would track where the money went, follow Lena and Eric when they made their so-called business runs, and gather photographic proof. I didn't like spying on my own sister, but the thought of losing Mom's house made my stomach churn harder than any sense of family loyalty. The first week of surveillance didn't take long to pay off. Samir called me late one night, his voice steady but urgent. "I got them," he said. "Your sister and her boyfriend just walked out of a bank downtown. They wired 20 grand to an offshore account." He sent photos straight to my phone. Lena in a blazer she definitely couldn't afford. Eric holding paperwork, both looking smug. Seeing those photos made my hands shake again. Not with restraint this time, but with pure anger. It wasn't just carelessness, they were laundering money like professionals. Samir kept digging. Within days, he traced the LLC to nothing more than a rented mailbox and a bank account that bled money into Eric's personal expenses, casino charges, car payments, and dinners at restaurants Mom hadn't stepped foot in since Dad died. Each receipt was another nail in the coffin of Lena's family venture. Meanwhile, I kept up the act at home. Lena bragged about how she was building something big, and how one day I'd thank her for securing our future. I bit my tongue and nodded, memorizing every word, every slip she made about investors or capital. Mom just looked confused most of the time, asking me quietly if everything was okay. I told her I had it under control, though inside I was counting the days before Lena did something irreversible. Then came the moment that sealed it. Samir called with a recording. In our state, one-party consent meant I could legally record conversations as long as one person knew. He'd managed to catch Lena and Eric talking outside a bar. On the tape, Lena laughed about how easy it had been to use Mom's trust to get the bank loan. Eric joked that Mom would be in a nursing home before she ever figured it out. I listened to that recording 3 times, jaw locked. Hearing my own sister laugh about throwing Mom into a nursing home like she was disposable, it lit something in me I couldn't turn off. Samir didn't stop there. He pulled property records and found out they'd tried to use Mom's credit to secure a lease on a second house for investment purposes. The application was denied, but the attempt was in black and white. It was clear. Lena and Eric weren't dabbling. They were actively scheming, and Mom was their golden goose. I went back to Captain Whitaker with the new evidence. He skimmed the file, eyes narrowing. "This isn't just bad behavior anymore. This is fraud. Abuse of POA. Possible wire fraud depending on how far the money traveled." His advice was the same. Build everything piece by piece, airtight. Courts don't deal in emotions, they deal in proof. I felt like I was living 2 lives by day. The dutiful daughter eating dinner with Mom and nodding at Lena's fake smiles, and by night, the soldier collecting intel, prepping for a confrontation that would hit harder than anything I'd faced in uniform. But even with all the evidence, one thing kept nagging me. Lena was clever enough to know when lines were being crossed. Why risk leaving so many trails? The answer came when Samir dug deeper into Eric. Turns out he had a record 2 counts of securities fraud from a few years back. Both pled down to misdemeanors. That's when it clicked. Eric wasn't just the boyfriend. He was the architect. He knew the system, knew how to stretch POA authority to the edge, and Lena was the willing accomplice. The worst part was knowing Mom had no idea. She still saw Lena as the responsible one, the daughter who helped with the bills while I was away serving. If I dropped the bomb without airtight proof, Lena would twist it, spin the story until Mom doubted me. I'd seen her do it before, make herself the victim, paint me as the bossy soldier who didn't understand how hard real life was. Samir suggested we go a step further, document Lena's interactions with Mom. If she pressures your mom, even casually, it shows a pattern, he said. So we placed a discreet camera in the living room, angled at the couch where Lena usually cornered Mom with important papers. It didn't take long. Within a week, the footage showed Lena pushing Mom to sign documents without explaining them, brushing off Mom's questions, snapping at her when she hesitated. That video was the tipping point for me. Watching Mom shrink back while Lena shoved papers under her nose was worse than seeing any bank record. It wasn't just financial anymore, it was personal, emotional. She wasn't just stealing money. She was stripping Mom of dignity. I spent that night in the garage, pacing between the boxes of Dad's old tools, clenching and unclenching my fists. Every mission I'd ever run had rules of engagement, but this wasn't a battlefield with clear lines. This was family. And family doesn't get an easy set of rules. The next morning, Lena strutted into the kitchen, acting like nothing was wrong, talking about some business dinner she and Eric had lined up. I poured my coffee, nodded, and said nothing. Inside, though, the plan was already taking shape. I wasn't going to let Mom lose everything Dad built, and I wasn't going to let Lena and Eric laugh their way to the bank with money that didn't belong to them. The first hint that Lena sensed I was onto her came one Saturday afternoon when I stopped by Mom's to drop off groceries. As soon as I walked in, I noticed two of our cousins, Mark and Jenny, sitting in the living room. They looked uncomfortable, cups of untouched coffee in their hands. Lena was standing like a ringmaster in the middle of the room, telling some dramatic story. The second she spotted me, her tone shifted, but the tension hung in the air like smoke. Jenny gave me a tight smile. Mark avoided my eyes. Mom sat in her recliner, lips pressed together, clearly stuck in the crossfire. I asked what was going on, and Lena jumped in before anyone else could answer. "Oh, just filling them in," she said sweetly. "They were worried about Mom, so I explained how you've been trying to take control of everything." I froze. "Come again?" Lena crossed her arms, tilting her head in that smug way she had since childhood. "Don't play dumb. You've been sneaking around, questioning Mom's decisions, acting like she can't manage her own life. I told them how you've been pushing her to sign things she doesn't even understand." I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it was. She was describing her own behavior word for word, projecting it onto me. And of course, she did it in front of family, so I'd look defensive if I denied it. Classic Lena. Mark finally looked at me and muttered, "She made it sound like you're planning to put Aunt Ellen in a nursing home." That hit me square in the chest. The same nursing home threat she'd laughed about with Eric was now twisted around and pinned on me. I set the grocery bags down carefully, keeping my voice calm. "That's not true. You know me better than that." But Lena pounced before my words could land. "See? She's always so controlling. Always acting like she's the only one who knows what's best. It's exhausting." Mom tried to cut in with a quiet, "Girls, please." But Lena steamrolled right over her. The cousins didn't stay long after that, but the damage was done. I saw the doubt flicker in their faces as they left. That was Lena's real power, not just stealing money, but stealing trust. She knew if she could isolate me, make me look like the unstable one, then any evidence I gathered would be tainted by suspicion. The smear campaign didn't stop there. A week later, I got a call from one of Mom's old church friends. She asked gently if it was true I'd been pressuring Mom to sell the house. I felt my blood pressure spike. Lena was spreading her story beyond family now, planting seeds in the community. The timing wasn't random. Samir's investigation was producing more evidence every day, and Lena must have sensed the walls closing in. Eric added fuel to the fire. He cornered me in the driveway one evening, leaning against his beat-up car with that cocky grin. "You really think you're smarter than us, Major? Word gets around. People are already talking. Who do you think they'll believe, the daughter who's always gone, or the sister who's been here every day?" I stepped closer, close enough for him to drop the grin. "I don't need people to believe me," I said. I've got facts, and facts don't care about your little stories. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He just sneered and muttered something about sticking together as family, which coming from him was laughable. At home, Mom grew more withdrawn. She started asking me strange questions, like whether I really thought she couldn't handle her own money, or if I was planning to move her out. I reassured her again and again, but I could see the doubt Lena was planting had already taken root. It was cruel watching Mom torn between two daughters, one feeding her lies, the other trying to protect her without making her feel powerless. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find Lena sitting at the table with a stack of papers spread out in front of Mom. Mom looked overwhelmed, pen in hand, while Lena pointed to signature lines. My chest tightened. I stepped forward and asked what she was doing. Lena didn't even flinch. Just updating some things. Don't worry. It's nothing you'd understand. I snapped back. Then explain it to Mom, out loud, right now. She smirked. She trusts me. That's all that matters. Mom's hand shook as she set the pen down. Her eyes darted between us, desperate not to choose sides. That moment gutted me. Lena had trapped her sign and risk everything, or refuse and ignite another battle. I pulled the papers away, ignoring Lena's screech, and stuffed them into my bag. Mom whispered my name, half scared, half relieved. Lena exploded. She accused me of trying to control Mom, of undermining her caregiving. Her voice carried through the house, making sure the neighbors heard. She was staging the show, building her narrative brick by brick. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. Lena says you're being aggressive. Are you okay? It stung, not because Jenny doubted me, but because Lena was so effective at twisting reality. Samir warned me this would happen. When people like her feel cornered, they go on offense. They'll play the victim so loud it drowns out the truth. That's why evidence matters. Stay steady. Staying steady was easier said than done. Every time Lena smirked in front of Mom, every time she tossed out a half-truth to friends or cousins, I wanted to drag out the photos, the recordings, the receipts, and shove them in her face. But I knew blowing up too early would give her exactly what she wanted. Proof I was unstable. Meanwhile, Eric started planting his own seeds. I overheard him telling a neighbor that Mom's house was too big for her, and maybe it was time to downsize. The casual way he said it made me sick. Downsizing was code for selling the house, pocketing the difference, and leaving Mom with nothing. I doubled down on gathering evidence. Samir captured more recordings, including Lena complaining that I was milking the army thing to look like the responsible daughter, while she was the one really doing the work. She even bragged that she could convince Mom to sign anything if she framed it as helping Tessa. That one made me laugh bitterly. Imagine using my name as cover while she gutted our family. The lies, the whispers, the fake concern, it all built up like smoke before a fire. And underneath it, I could feel the real blaze waiting to break out. I tightened my laces before heading to drill that weekend, and the ritual felt different this time. Normally, the uniform was a switch. Pull it on, leave family mess behind, focus on the mission. But that morning, Lena's voice followed me out the door. All her accusations, the way she tried to pit Mom and the cousins against me. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was a threat. At the armory, I pulled Captain Whitaker aside. He'd already reviewed the file I gave him last time. Now I laid out the newest evidence. Samir's photos, the recordings, the stack of papers Lena shoved under Mom's nose. Whitaker listened without interrupting, the way good officers do. Then he leaned back and said, "You're dealing with two fronts: family loyalty and criminal liability. You'll need to decide if you're handling this as a daughter or as an officer who sees abuse of power." I hated the question because the answer was both. "She's my sister," I said, "but she's also robbing our mother blind." He gave me the kind of look that cuts right through excuses. "Then don't confuse compassion with weakness. You've been trained to gather facts, stay calm under pressure, and confront threats directly. Apply that here." His words settled something inside me. For months, I'd been bouncing between fury and hesitation. Now I realized I needed to treat this the same way I'd treat a mission. Discipline first, emotion later. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Mom while she worked on a crossword. I asked her simple questions: what bills she thought she'd paid, what papers Lena had shown her recently, what she remembered signing. Her answers were vague, foggy, not because she was incapable, but because Lena made sure she stayed confused. That's when I told her the truth, gently but clearly. Mom, Lena used your power of attorney to borrow money against the house. Her pencil slipped from her hand. She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head like she wanted to push the thought away. No, she wouldn't. I slid one of the bank statements toward her. She already did. Her hands trembled as she scanned the page. Why would she? I stopped her before she spiraled into excuses. Because she could, and because Eric knows how to play the system. For the first time, I saw the crack in Mom's defense of Lena. A mix of disbelief and betrayal passed over her face. She whispered, I thought she was helping me. I leaned in. She's helping herself. But I promise you, we're not going to lose this house. Not while I'm standing. The next morning, I called Adult Protective Services. It wasn't a move I wanted to make, but Whitaker had been right. This wasn't just sibling drama, it was elder abuse. The investigator I spoke with listened carefully as I explained. She asked for documentation, and I faxed over copies of everything: bank statements, recordings, even screenshots of Eric's LLC filings. Within days, APS scheduled an official interview with Mom. When Lena found out, she exploded. She cornered me in the driveway, voice shrill, calling me a traitor for dragging the government into family business. I didn't flinch. I just said, if you wanted to keep the government out, you shouldn't have stolen from your own mother. End quote. She screamed that I was trying to ruin her life. I almost laughed at the irony. She'd done a fine job of that herself. The confrontation shook Mom badly, though. She cried that night, not because of the investigation, but because her daughters were at war. I sat beside her, holding her hand, reminding her this wasn't about sides. It's about truth, I said, and truth doesn't pick favorites. Meanwhile, Eric tried a new tactic. He sent me a text that read, "We can work something out. No need to blow this up." I didn't reply. A second text came. "Think about your career. Army doesn't like scandals." That one made my blood run cold. He wasn't just scheming for money anymore, he was threatening my livelihood. I showed the messages to Whitaker, who told me to document everything and keep my chain of command in the loop if it escalated. Military life teaches you to guard your reputation as carefully as your weapon. I wasn't going to let Eric's slime trail touch mine. Samir added another piece to the puzzle. He traced withdrawals from the HELOC directly to casino markers in Eric's name. So not only were they draining Mom's equity, they were gambling it away. I stared at the receipts, thinking of Dad's hands sanding the porch rail, every nail he hammered into that house. They'd turned his work into poker chips. Still, I kept my cool in front of them. When Lena bragged at Sunday dinner about her business growing, I smiled and asked what their profit margin was. She stammered. Eric jumped in with some nonsense about early-stage investments. I pretended to be impressed while mentally filing away every detail for the case. The balance was hard being daughter, soldier, investigator all at once. But discipline kept me steady. I woke up each morning, laced my boots, and reminded myself, facts over feelings. Lena thrived on chaos, but I thrived on order, and order was exactly what would bring her down. I didn't tell Mom everything. I spared her the worst of the details: Eric's record, the offshore accounts, the casino trips. She didn't need that weight. What she needed was assurance, and I gave it to her every day. You're not losing your home. Not to them. One evening after drill, I stopped by Whitaker's office again. He spread all the evidence out across his desk, lining it up like pieces of a battle map. "You've got more than enough to prove abuse," he said. "Next step is timing. You want to make the confrontation public enough that she can't spin it, but safe enough that your mom doesn't collapse under the pressure." I nodded, already picturing the opportunity. Lena loved attention. She thrived on being the star at family gatherings. If there was ever a moment to pull the mask off, it would be then. As I left his office, I realized something had shifted in me. For months, I'd been reacting, dodging Lena's lies, patching holes she left behind. Now, I was planning. Discipline had replaced fury. Strategy had replaced panic. I was no longer just the sister fighting back. I was the soldier leading the operation. I couldn't shake the feeling that Eric was the one pulling the strings. Lena had always been manipulative, but she didn't have the brains for shell companies, offshore accounts, or wire transfers. That kind of operation needed someone who'd already danced close to the law. And Eric fit that role a little too perfectly. Samir called me one evening with a new update. "Your sister's boyfriend is dirty," he said flatly. I pulled court records out of Nevada. 2 counts of securities fraud from 2016. He pled down, but he lost his license to ever work in finance again. Then, I gripped the phone tighter. So he was banned from finance, and now he's managing an LLC? Samir chuckled bitterly. Managing is a nice word. He's laundering your mom's money through that LLC. And he's smart enough to keep Lena's name front and center, so if the whole thing blows up, she takes the first hit. Hearing that stung, not because I wanted to protect Lena, but because I could see exactly how Eric used her. She thought they were partners. In reality, she was his shield. Later that week, I spotted Eric's car outside the house when I came by after drill. He was on the porch, leaning against the railing like he owned the place. When I stepped out of my truck, he smirked. "Busy day, Major?" he asked, dragging out the rank like it was a joke. I didn't answer. I just walked past him, but he wasn't done. "Funny thing," he said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Word is, you've got a temper problem. Dangerous mix with military folks. People might start wondering if you're stable." I froze mid-step. That was his play. If they couldn't bury me with lies about Mom, they'd smear me personally, drag my career into it. I turned slowly. "Careful, Eric," I said. "You're not the first punk who thought threats made him look powerful. They just make you look desperate." His grin faltered for a second before snapping back. "We'll see who's desperate when this all shakes out." Inside, Mom was anxious, wringing her hands. "He said the neighbors think you're trying to get me put away," she whispered. My chest tightened. Eric was poisoning every circle we had, drip by drip. That night, I asked Samir to dig deeper, not just financials, but associates, addresses, everything. 2 days later, he handed me a folder thick enough to choke on. Inside were property records, old arrest reports, even a bankruptcy tied to a scam business Eric ran in Arizona. Buried in the stack was something worse. A restraining order filed by a former girlfriend who accused him of intimidation and threats. I read every page twice, my jaw locked. This wasn't just sleazy business. Eric was dangerous. Meanwhile, Lena was doubling down. She started showing up at family gatherings I wasn't even at, spinning her version of the story to anyone who'd listen. According to her, I was jealous of her success, paranoid about Eric, and trying to tear the family apart because I couldn't stand not being in control. It was a perfect script, half-truths wrapped in emotional language, delivered with crocodile tears. One evening, Mom's neighbor stopped me as I was unloading groceries. She lowered her voice and said, "Honey, your sister told me you were trying to sell your mom's house out from under her. Is that true?" I almost dropped the milk. The lie wasn't just spreading, it was becoming the narrative. I forced myself to smile and said calmly, "No, that's not true. I'm the one keeping the house safe." But inside, the anger was boiling. Samir gave me another bombshell a week later. "They tried to spearfish your TSP account." I blinked. "My what?" "Your thrift savings plan, retirement. Someone sent a spoof email pretending to be TSP support, asking for login credentials. They timed it right after a drill weekend, probably thinking you'd be too busy to notice." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're saying Eric tried to hack my military retirement?" Samir didn't hesitate. The timing, the IP address, the fact that it was routed through one of his known addresses, it all points to him. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They weren't satisfied draining Mom. They wanted me too. When I told Whitaker, he was stone-faced. "That's federal. If you can tie it back to him, that's not family drama anymore, that's prison time." I realized then that Eric's arrogance wasn't just greed. He thought he was untouchable. He thought Lena's family shield, plus his manipulative charm, would keep the law at bay. At home, I started locking my bedroom door again, something I hadn't done since high school. Mom noticed, and it broke my heart when she asked if I was afraid of my own sister. I didn't answer. The truth would only make her cry harder. Meanwhile, Eric tried to cozy up to Mom, acting like the dutiful boyfriend. He'd show up with groceries, mow the lawn, even fix a leaky faucet. But Samir's photos told the truth. An hour after helping, Eric was at the casino, blowing money that didn't belong to him. The manipulation was constant, suffocating. Lena played the loyal daughter, Eric played the supportive partner, and together they painted me as the villain. But every smear, every lie, every failed phishing attempt only made me more determined. One night, I sat at the kitchen table, Dad's old hammer lying across from me like a reminder. He built this house with sweat and patience. He taught us better than this. I whispered to myself, not one more dollar, not one more signature, not one more lie. The evidence pile was thick. The APS file was open. And Eric's past, ugly and undeniable, was finally on the record. He wasn't just a shady boyfriend anymore, he was a threat to everything my family had left. I started spending late nights at the dining room table, spreading papers across the surface like maps before a battle. Bank records on one side, Samir's photos on the other, and in the middle, a stack of documents from APS that confirmed what Whitaker already told me. This wasn't just ugly family drama, it was legally defined elder abuse. Every page felt heavier than the last. Samir came by with a flash drive one evening. Everything we've got is backed up here. Audio, video, financials. If she tries to cry her way out, this shuts it down. He set it down next to Dad's old hammer, the one I'd left on the table as a reminder of what was at stake. But timing's going to matter. You can't spring this in some back hallway. You need an audience so she can't rewrite the story later. He was right. Lena lived off perception. She didn't care if the truth was against her, as long as people believed her side louder. The only way to break her grip was to pull the curtain back in front of everyone who'd been swallowing her lies. That's when the idea formed, the memorial dinner for Dad. Every year we gathered at the house to honor him, extended family, neighbors, even some of Dad's old buddies from the plant. Lena always treated it like her stage, basking in sympathy while talking about how much she sacrificed to care for Mom. It was the perfect setup. This year, the spotlight would turn. I looped in Whitaker and a civilian attorney named Judith Park, someone he trusted for cases involving POA abuse. Judith looked over the file and gave a tight nod. It's clean. You've got recordings, financial trails, and testimony potential. What you need now is control of the room. End quote. Control of the room, I knew that phrase well. It was the same principle as leading a briefing. If you didn't command the space, you lost it. I started planning the dinner like an operation. Who would sit where, when I'd reveal each piece of evidence, and how to keep Mom shielded while still present. Mom was hesitant when I floated the idea. Do we really have to bring this up at a family dinner? She asked softly. I squeezed her hand. Mom, this isn't about embarrassing anyone. It's about ending it, once and for all. Meanwhile, Lena and Eric had no clue. They went on as if nothing was coming. Lena bragging about her business contacts, Eric strutting around like he owned the driveway. They were so confident in their web of lies they didn't notice the walls closing in. In the days leading up to the dinner, Samir added one last layer of insurance. He followed Eric to another meeting at a strip mall office and caught him on camera handing over an envelope of cash. Cross-checking the timing with bank withdrawals, it was obvious. He was moving HELOC money through middlemen to dodge scrutiny. The video went straight into the evidence file. The night before the dinner, I rehearsed my words in the mirror, not to dramatize but to keep steady. I wasn't going to scream or cry. Lena thrived on chaos, and Eric thrived on intimidation. My job was to stay calm, to let the evidence speak louder than either of them. I also prepared the tech. Samir loaned me a small projector, and Judith arranged a simple slideshow of key documents, clear, undeniable, certified copies. No one could accuse me of tampering or exaggerating. Every detail had a timestamp and source. I slept barely 3 hours that night. When I woke, the weight in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. The day of the dinner, Lena showed up early in a new dress, all smiles, acting like she was hosting instead of Mom. She ordered people around the kitchen, told the cousins where to sit, and paraded trays of food she hadn't cooked. I watched her play the role, all sweetness to the guests, poison in private. Eric arrived later, carrying a bottle of overpriced wine he probably bought with Mom's money. He greeted everyone loudly, hugging relatives he barely knew, winking at neighbors like he was some charming benefactor. The smugness on his face almost made me lose focus, but I reminded myself, calm, steady, let the facts work. As people settled, I caught Judith's eye across the room. She gave a subtle nod it was time. Dinner started as expected. Small talk, laughter, stories about Dad. Then Lena raised her glass, ready to give her usual speech about how hard the year had been and how she was keeping the family together. I stood before she could finish, sliding the flash drive into the laptop connected to the projector. The first image appeared on the wall. A bank withdrawal slip for $20,000, Lena's signature scrawled at the bottom. The room went silent. I kept my voice even. This is money taken out against Mom's house, without her knowledge. Lena blinked, thrown off but recovering quickly. That's a family loan, you don't understand the details. I clicked again. A photo of her and Eric leaving the bank, time-stamped to the same day. A murmur spread through the room. This, I said, is what those details look like. Her smile cracked. Eric shifted in his chair, jaw tightening. I didn't stop. The next slide showed the LLC registration, their names side by side, no employees, no revenue. Then the casino receipts, the wire transfers, the offshore account numbers. Each click of the mouse was another nail. And with every nail, Lena's voice shrank. When I finally played the audio clip, Lena laughing about Mom ending up in a nursing home, the silence was suffocating. Even the neighbors, who'd been buying her stories for months, looked horrified. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she held my hand tight. Eric tried to bark back. This doesn't prove anything. Anyone can make fake recordings. Judith stood then, calm as stone. Certified copies, chain of custody intact, and admissible in court. The room turned on him instantly. People he'd been charming for years now stared at him, like the fraud he was. I looked straight at Lena. You've been telling everyone I'm trying to take Mom's freedom. The truth is, you've been stripping it from her every day, one signature at a time. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, Lena had no script. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. All the chatter, all the laughter that had filled the house minutes earlier was gone. Eyes darted between the projector screen, Lena's frozen smile, and Eric's clenched jaw. I let the silence sit before speaking again. This isn't a misunderstanding. It isn't a family loan. It's theft. It's manipulation. And it's abuse. Lena shot up from her chair, her wine glass trembling in her hand. How dare you humiliate me like this in front of everyone? You think you're some kind of hero because you wear a uniform? You don't even live here. You have no idea what it takes to keep this family running. Her voice cracked halfway through, the mask slipping. A few cousins flinched at the outburst. Mom just stared at her, tears still wet on her cheeks. I didn't raise my voice. Keeping a family running doesn't involve wiring money to casinos or plotting nursing homes for your own mother. Eric slammed his palm against the table. This is slander? None of this would hold up in court. Judith, seated calmly near the end of the table, leaned forward. On the contrary, it already does. Certified documents, video surveillance, audio recordings. It's airtight. If you'd like to test it in court, I'll be filing tomorrow morning. A murmur rippled through the room. The neighbors whispered to each other. Some of the cousins nodded quietly, as if puzzle pieces were finally falling into place. Lena tried one last angle. She dropped into a chair and covered her face with her hands, shaking her shoulders in mock sobs. All I ever did was try to help. Tessa has always hated me, and now she's destroying me in front of my family. Mom's voice, soft but firm, cut through the performance. Stop it, Lena. Everyone turned to her. She wiped her eyes and looked directly at her oldest daughter. I believed you. For years I believed every word. But no more. Lena's sobs stalled instantly. She peeked through her fingers, shocked that Mom hadn't played along. I pressed the point. This isn't about me versus you. This is about Mom's safety, her home, her dignity. And you threw all of that away for greed. Eric stood, knocking his chair back, trying to redirect. This family doesn't understand business. You're all stuck in the past. We were building something bigger than this crumbling house. Judith clicked the projector once more. The screen filled with the video of Eric sliding cash across a table at the strip mall office. The timestamp matched a withdrawal from the HELOC. Gasps filled the room. This, Judith said sharply, is money stolen from Ellen Monroe's home equity being laundered through a shell operation. You can call it business if you want. The law calls it fraud. Eric's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped closer to the table, my boots echoing on the hardwood. For months, You both tried to paint me as paranoid, jealous, controlling. You spread lies to our family, to our neighbors, even to Mom. But here's the truth. You abused a legal document, you drained bank accounts, and you gambled away our father's legacy, and now everyone can see it. The projector light flickered across Lena's face, highlighting the panic that no amount of fake tears could hide. Cousin Jenny finally spoke up. Lena, you told us Tessa wanted to force Aunt Ellen into a nursing home. But that was you. Her voice broke, but she didn't look away. You lied to all of us. Lena sputtered. You don't understand. No, Jenny cut her off. We understand perfectly now. The shift in the room was palpable. People who had walked in ready to believe Lena were now leaning away from her, their sympathy gone. Eric tried one last desperate move. He pointed at me, voice shaking. She set us up. The army trained her to do this. Surveillance, spying, manipulation, it's second nature for her. That almost made me laugh. The army trained me to protect people, to stand up to bullies, and tonight, that training finally came in handy. The crowd wasn't buying his excuses. Neighbors whispered words like disgusting and criminal. Even Mark, who had seemed doubtful before, stood and shook his head at Lena. Dad trusted you with this house. You dishonored all of it. I calls it. The weight of the truth finally cracked the performance. Lena dropped her act completely, rage twisting her face. She jabbed a finger at me. You think you've won? You think this makes you better? You'll regret this, Tessa. You don't know what you've started. I didn't flinch. What I started was stopping you. The room fell quiet again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't shock, it was clarity. Mom rose slowly from her chair, gripping the table for balance. She looked first at me, then at Lena. Her voice was steady. I want the power of attorney revoked. Effective immediately. Judith nodded. That can be arranged, Mrs. Monroe. Lena's eyes went wide. For the first time, she realized she'd lost control completely. I placed the flash drive back in my pocket and shut the laptop. The evidence had done its job. For years, Lena had controlled the narrative. But tonight, the story belonged to the truth. The fallout began almost immediately after that dinner. Once the projector went dark and people began filing out of the house, whispers turned into phone calls, and phone calls turned into formal complaints. Neighbors who had once smiled politely at Lena now avoided her altogether. Cousins who used to parrot her stories started texting me, apologizing for believing her. The lies collapsed faster than I expected. Judith wasted no time. The next morning, she filed the petition to revoke the power of attorney in county court. She included every piece of evidence: the HELOC withdrawals, the Shell LLC, the casino receipts, the recordings, even Eric's shady past. APS backed the petition with their own report, documenting Mom's vulnerability and Lena's exploitation. The case was airtight. When the sheriff's office delivered the notice, Lena threw a fit so loud the entire block probably heard it. She stormed into Mom's house, demanding to know how I could betray her like that. Mom, to her credit, didn't back down. She looked her oldest daughter in the eye and said, "You betrayed yourself." Eric tried to play tough in the days that followed. He called me one evening, voice low and threatening. "You think you can bury me with paperwork? I've been through worse. Judges don't scare me." I didn't bother raising my voice. It's not the judge you should be worried about. It's the bank. It's APS. It's fraud investigators who live for cases like this. They don't care about family drama, they care about prison sentences. He hung up without another word. The bank moved quickly once the petition landed. They froze the HELOC account, cut off access, and launched their own review. I met with the branch manager in person, a man who had once believed Lena's polished act. His tone was different, now cautious, almost embarrassed. "We should have caught this earlier," he admitted. "The withdrawals, the shell company, it's a clear abuse of POA." They flagged Lena and Eric with the bank's fraud division, which meant no more easy loans, no more fast withdrawals, and a long uphill climb if they ever tried again. The county court hearing was scheduled within 2 weeks. It wasn't a drawn-out trial, but the room still filled with tension. Lena showed up in a blazer 2 sizes too small, trying to look respectable. Eric trailed behind her, avoiding eye contact. On our side, Judith sat poised with her folders. APS had their investigator ready, and Whitaker had quietly shown up in uniform, a silent reminder of credibility. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, his brow furrowing deeper with each document. Lena tried her usual theatrics, crying about being misunderstood, about how she was just helping her mother. The judge cut her off mid-sentence. Helping does not involve gambling away a senior citizen's home equity, he said flatly. Eric leaned forward, attempting to interrupt, but Judith slid the restraining order from his past across the table. The judge's eyes narrowed. You failed to disclose this history while involving yourself in financial decisions for this family. That is a serious omission. In less than 30 minutes, the decision was made. The power of attorney was revoked, effective immediately. Mom's financial control was placed under temporary guardianship until a proper trust could be established, with oversight to prevent further abuse. The gavel hit, and Lena's face drained of color. She hissed at me as we stood to leave. You think this is over? You just ruined your own family. I didn't even break stride. No, Lena, I saved it. After the hearing, APS delivered a protective order for Mom, preventing Lena from pressuring her into signing anything. That meant no more surprise documents at the kitchen table, no more ambushes with a pen in hand. For the first time in months, Mom could exhale without Lena hovering over her shoulder. But Eric wasn't done trying to wriggle out. Within days, investigators traced more of the HELOC funds into his personal accounts. That tipped it into criminal territory. White-collar crimes don't move fast, but when they move, they're relentless. The district attorney's office opened an inquiry, and Eric was suddenly facing more than angry relatives, he was facing charges. Neighbors who had once waved at him now crossed the street to avoid him. The smug grin he wore everywhere was gone. He started parking his car 2 blocks away, probably to dodge process servers. Meanwhile, Lena unraveled. Without control of Mom's finances, she lost her leverage. The community she'd cultivated with gossip and fake concern evaporated overnight. Church friends stopped returning her calls. Relatives stopped inviting her to dinners. She went from self-appointed matriarch to outcast in record time. Mom, though shaken, grew stronger with each passing week. I helped her set up a living trust, splitting authority between me and a neutral third-party trustee to keep everything transparent. We froze her credit, closed unnecessary accounts, and added extra verification steps for every transaction. She told me one evening, with tears in her eyes, I finally feel safe again. I realized that safety was more valuable than any dollar amount. Eric's downfall accelerated when the DA's office subpoenaed casino records. Surveillance footage matched Samir's photos. Eric cashing out chips hours after withdrawals from Mom's Hello. The charges stacked quickly. Fraud, elder exploitation, attempted wire fraud. The man who thought he was untouchable now faced the very real possibility of prison time. Lena tried to distance herself, painting Eric as the mastermind. But the paper trail didn't lie. Her signatures were everywhere. Even if she avoided prison, she couldn't avoid the permanent stain of being recorded in APS's files as an abuser. That alone was enough to strip her of any legal authority over Mom or anyone else ever again. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, Lena and Eric worked tirelessly to destroy my credibility, whispering that I was unstable, dangerous, controlling. In the end, their own actions screamed louder than any lie they spread. One quiet evening, I sat on the porch with Mom, the sun setting over the house Dad built. She looked at me and asked, "Did I raise you girls so differently?" I thought about it before answering. You raised us both with love, but choices shape people more than upbringing. And Lena chose wrong. Mom sighed, leaning back in her chair. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. I placed my hand over hers. You trusted her. That's not a flaw, Mom. That's kindness. She's the one who turned it into a weapon. The legal battles weren't completely over. Eric still had arraignments ahead, and Lena had to deal with the financial mess she'd helped create, but for the first time, the tide had turned fully in our favor. The house was safe. Mom was protected. The power Lena once wielded had been ripped away, replaced by accountability she couldn't dodge. For years, she had used shame and manipulation to silence me. Now, the truth had spoken louder than she ever could. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee the morning Eric's arraignment hit the docket. I sat behind Mom, hands steady on her shoulders as we waited for the judge to enter. Lena showed up too, though she kept her distance, pretending she was there, just to support her boyfriend. The irony was thick, supporting him while he was charged with elder financial abuse, bank fraud, and wire fraud. The prosecutor didn't waste time. They laid out a timeline of withdrawals, matched with casino cash-outs and Eric's bank deposits. Screens lit up with footage of him at slot machines, stuffing cash into machines and cashing out minutes later. Then came Samir's photos, time-stamped, showing Lena with him at the bank the same morning of one of the largest withdrawals. Eric tried to look smug, but the sweat beating at his temples betrayed him. His attorney stammered through a plea for leniency, claiming Eric never intended to harm anyone. The judge raised an eyebrow. $120,000 says otherwise. Bail was set high enough that Eric wouldn't be walking free on pocket change. The gavel cracked, and Eric's expression shifted from arrogance to panic. Outside the courthouse, reporters circled like hawks. One shoved a mic toward me, asking how it felt to watch my own sister's partner face charges. I answered plainly, "Justice doesn't care about titles or relationships. It cares about actions." The clip aired on the evening news, and for once the community saw Lena not as the victim she pretended to be, but as the accomplice she really was. Protective orders followed swiftly. Lena was barred from contacting Mom without legal counsel present. The document spelled out every restriction: no texts, no surprise visits, no asking, just to borrow something. She was furious, pacing in front of the courthouse like a caged animal. She screamed at me, "You poisoned everyone against me." I didn't raise my voice. "You did that yourself." The weeks that followed felt like the quiet after a storm. APS closed their investigation, labeling the case substantiated elder abuse. That phrase alone carried weight. It meant Lena's name was now in state records, flagged permanently. No chance of ever becoming a guardian for anyone. No chance of running her manipulative routines again with the blessing of legal authority. Eric's world collapsed even faster. His employer, a construction subcontractor in Phoenix, fired him the moment the DA's charges became public. Word spread quickly, and his reputation tanked. He went from boasting at neighborhood barbecues about business ventures to being a cautionary tale whispered in coffee shops. The sheriff's office even found forged documents tied to his LLC. He had tried to falsify invoices to justify the missing HELOC money. That added forgery charges to his pile, and suddenly his "I've been through worse" bravado looked laughable. Meanwhile, Lena scrambled to reinvent herself. She tried to gather sympathy at church, painting herself as the sister caught in the middle of a vendetta. But parishioners weren't buying it. Too many had seen her explode at me in public. Too many knew about the protective order, and too many had watched the evening news coverage. She was no longer a queen bee, she was radioactive. I'll admit, part of me expected her to double down, to launch smear campaigns or cook up wild accusations. But she didn't have the resources anymore. Her credibility was shot, her access to Mom's accounts was gone, and Eric was too busy fighting to stay out of prison to help her stage new schemes. The most surreal moment came during a follow-up meeting with Judith. She leaned back in her office chair, tapping a file. "You know, Tessa, this is the kind of case law professors love. Family, fraud, betrayal, military service, elder abuse, it's textbook." She smirked. "You've got yourself a perfect storm." I thought about that as I walked out of her office. She was right. This wasn't just about saving money or property, it was about dismantling a system of lies built on family ties. Mom's relief was visible in her daily life. She no longer jumped when the phone rang, no longer whispered in case Lena overheard. She baked again, humming as she worked in the kitchen. She even pulled out Dad's old vinyl records, filling the house with music that had been silent for years. Watching her reclaim her peace was the biggest victory of all. Still, justice had to be thorough. The DA eventually offered Eric a plea deal, 5 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 3, plus restitution payments. He took it, probably realizing the alternative meant a decade or more. Lena wasn't charged criminally, but she was named repeatedly in testimony. Her signature on withdrawal forms, her presence in surveillance footage, her hand in creating the LLC, all of it lived forever in court records. The final reckoning came during a civil suit hearing. Judith pushed for restitution, demanding repayment of stolen funds. The court ordered Eric and Lena jointly liable for over $80,000, though everyone knew collecting it would be like squeezing blood from a stone. Still, the judgment was symbolic. A legal stamp branding them both responsible. That night, as I locked up Mom's house, Lena appeared in the driveway. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. She spat venom through clenched teeth. You'll regret this. One day, you'll see what it feels like to have nothing. I didn't flinch. I've already seen it, Lena. You created it for Mom, and I'll never let you do it again. She didn't answer. She just stood there until the sheriff's deputy accompanying me reminded her about the protective order. She backed away slowly, muttering under her breath, and disappeared into Eric's old truck. Walking inside, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, tea in hand. She looked up and said, "You did it, Tessa. You saved us." I sat down across from her, suddenly feeling the weight of months of battles catch up to me. No, Mom, we saved ourselves. Together. The legal side was almost over, but the real victory was deeper. Lena no longer had power. Eric no longer had access. The lies no longer had control. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Mom slid a plate of pancakes across the table. She hadn't made breakfast like that in years, not since Lena had taken over the house with her endless lists of what was acceptable. Now there was no one hovering to criticize, no one snapping about calories or appearances. Just the smell of butter and maple syrup, the kind of peace we hadn't known in far too long. We spent the next weeks finalizing the living trust. Judith connected us with a trustee firm that handled veterans' families. Everything was set up to be transparent, with clear rules about withdrawals, bills, and healthcare expenses. Mom insisted I co-manage, but with oversight in place so neither of us felt burdened. "I don't want you to ever feel trapped the way I did with Lena," she told me. I nodded, realizing she wasn't just protecting her future, she was protecting mine too. With the finances secured, we turned to the simple things that made life worth living. We redecorated Mom's house, stripping out Lena's sterile touches. The heavy curtains she had insisted on were replaced with light ones that let in the Sunday. The gaudy wall art she'd bragged about finding at auctions went straight to Goodwill. In its place, we hung Dad's old photographs, landscapes from family road trips, portraits of us as kids with crooked smiles. For the first time in years, the house actually looked like home again. I took leave from the Army to be around during this transition. The military had always been a core part of who I was, and I'd never wavered in that duty. But being here for Mom, shoulder to shoulder through the fallout, felt just as important. Whitaker checked in occasionally, reminding me that integrity didn't only belong in uniform, it was how we carried ourselves everywhere. His words stuck with me. Mom began opening up more about the hurt Lena had caused. One evening, as we sat on the porch, she admitted, "I kept hoping she'd change, that maybe if I gave her enough, she'd finally see me as more than a wallet." Her voice cracked. "But I realize now that no amount of love can fix someone determined to betray you." I held her hand and answered, "You don't owe her excuses. She chose greed over family. That's on her." It wasn't just Mom healing. I found myself confronting the years of humiliation Lena had piled on me, every cutting remark, every attempt to paint me as controlling or cold. For so long, I let her words gnaw at me. But after watching her unravel, I finally understood. Projection had been her weapon. She accused others of the very things she was guilty of. Realizing that lifted a weight I hadn't even known I was still carrying. Neighbors started coming by again, not with pity but with respect. They brought casseroles, asked how Mom was doing, and stayed to chat on the porch. One even said, "Tessa, you showed all of us what it looks like to stand up to family without tearing yourself down." That meant more than I expected. It was validation that the ugliness Lena had spread hadn't stuck to me. The Army community also rallied. Some of my unit members visited, offering to fix things around the house, install better locks, even check on Mom while I was away. It reminded me that family wasn't just blood, it was also the people who showed up when it mattered. As months passed, Lena drifted out of the picture. Word spread that she'd moved to another state, trying to start over where fewer people knew her record. The APS entry followed her, though, and her reputation was beyond repair. She became a ghost of her own making. Eric, meanwhile, reported to prison, where orange jumpsuits replaced tailored jackets. The thought of him behind bars didn't spark joy, exactly. but it felt like balance had been restored. 1 year later, we marked Dad's anniversary with a family gathering. This time, the air wasn't tense. Relatives who had once believed Lena's stories came with open apologies. Aunts who had accused me of being too harsh now hugged me tightly. Even cousins who had stayed silent admitted, "We should have spoken up sooner." I didn't dwell on the past. It was enough to see everyone sitting together in peace, the way family was supposed to be. At the center of the table sat a framed challenge coin I'd received when I pinned on Major. I placed it there deliberately, not to flaunt rank, but to remind everyone what honor looked like. Military service had taught me that honor wasn't about medals or parades. It was about choosing truth when lies were easier, about protecting those who couldn't defend themselves, about standing steady even when it meant standing alone. During dinner, Mom raised her glass. Her voice was strong, free of the tremors that used to shadow her words. To family not the kind bound by papers or poisoned by greed, but the kind that fights for each other. Glasses clinked, and in that moment, it felt like we'd finally rebuilt what Lena had tried to destroy. After everyone left, I stayed behind with Mom to clean up. She smiled as she stacked plates and said, "I don't feel afraid anymore." I realized she meant more than just finances. She meant Lena's shadow no longer haunted her. Later that night, I stood alone in the backyard, staring up at the stars. I thought about the journey from humiliation in that restaurant to this quiet victory. It hadn't been easy. It had cost time, tears, and trust. But we had made it. We had turned betrayal into a lesson, chaos into structure, and shame into strength. And as I looked back into the warm glow of the house, Mom humming in the kitchen, the photographs on the walls, the challenge coin on the table, I knew we hadn't just survived Lena's schemes. We had built something stronger in their place. Looking back now, I realized that none of this was really about money. It wasn't about the HELOC, or the fraudulent LLC, or even Eric's casino nights. What it was truly about was respect. Respect for the people who raised you, for the sacrifices that built the foundation of your life. Lena lost that respect the moment she treated our mother like a burden instead of a blessing. And once you cross that line, once you decide greed matters more than family, it's only a matter of time before everything crumbles. For me, this battle was never optional. The Army trained me to face hard choices, but it was being my mother's daughter that made me step into that fight. Protecting her wasn't a duty I could walk away from. It was who I am. What surprised me most wasn't Lena's betrayal. Deep down, I'd seen the cracks forming for years. What surprised me was the strength Mom found once the truth came to light. She didn't just survive losing her oldest daughter to lies and manipulation, she stood taller because of it. Watching her rediscover her voice reminded me that resilience doesn't belong only to soldiers. It belongs to anyone who chooses truth over fear. The house feels lighter now. Not just because the locks are changed and the finances are secure, but because the weight of deception is gone. We eat together, laugh without tension, and plan for the future without dread. If there's one thing I'll carry forward, it's this. Honor isn't a medal you pin on a uniform. It's the quiet decision, day after day, to defend what matters most. For me, that was my family. And though the scars of betrayal will never fully fade, neither will the proof that we overcame it with truth, with strength, and with the kind of love no scam can ever steal.